All right. I am assuming we are now broadcast. I'm Ann Landry. I am the Vice Chair of the Select Board, and I will be serving as Chair for the beginning of this evening's meeting. I'm joined on the screen by fellow board members, Mark Doxer, Carlo Bacci, and Chris Haley. We expect to be joined later this evening by Chair Karen Herrick. And we can get started. We are only meeting remotely today. There is no in-person component of this evening's meeting. We have a full agenda, including liaison and town manager reports, public comment, the appointment of Sharon Engstrom as town accountant, an update from our town accountant, a review and possibly voting to amend our select board policy section relating to the process for evaluating the town manager. We are scheduled to discuss and vote on the creation of an ad hoc ARPA advisory committee and committee charge, and to vote to discuss and or vote to appoint ex officio and staff members to that committee. We are due to discuss and vote to allocate funds, grant funds for the purchase of COVID test kits, to discuss recent land purchases and any other town-owned large building parcels. We expect to hear from Mark Doxer an update on Lot 5 access to the town forest. And prior to concluding with a discussion of future agendas and approval of meeting minutes, we will discuss and or vote on an overnight parking ban. So without further ado, do I hear any from my fellow board members, any liaison reports this evening? Mark.
Thanks, Ann. Good evening, folks. A couple of liaison reports. The recalc group has been meeting pretty much at every couple of week cadence. At our last meeting, a couple of things happened. One is that we had a joint meeting with the Council on Aging, and we're able to get some input from them about what their thoughts are on the needs for the senior community and specifically for a senior center. And they have decided to also bring it back and have more discussion at their next meeting, and then bring it back to the recalc. Both of those meetings are scheduled for next week. Also with the recalc, there is an opening on the board, and I don't know the answer to this. Jackie may know the answer to this, but if we have some candidates that have already sent in applications, we should talk at some point about setting up a VASC meeting to see if we can get that other member brought on board. The other thing is, and sorry, I saw Jane, there you are over there. We have hired a consultant, which is what town meeting had asked to take place back almost, not quite a year ago, but I guess 8 or 9 months ago. And so there's been a consultant hired, and then there'll be some input given to that consultant for the project with the goal of them reaching out to the community and bringing some feedback, hopefully in time for April town meeting. It's February, getting tight. I'm hoping it can make that time frame, but in any event, to start soliciting more impact from the entire community in terms of what's going on. Also attended the Trust Commissioners meeting, and the only thing that's interesting there is because of COVID, some funds that typically would be spent on an annual basis weren't, and Council on Aging and others, because they just haven't been able to hold those events. So that's the bad news. I guess the good news is that there are slightly larger balances available since the money wasn't spent. So that may be an opportunity for things going forward from there. And that's it.
Thank you, Mark. Chris, I see behind you, it looks like Select Board RCTV. That is not a live stream, is it?
No.
Okay,
No.
all right. Just wanted to make sure we were
Yes.
Streaming. Okay, very good, very good.
I was just messing with you, Ann. It worked.
Do we have, yeah, very effective. Do you have a liaison report this evening, Chris?
Yes, thank you, Ann. So I got 2 quick ones. First is the school committee met last week and voted to approve the staggering plan for full-day kindergarten, reducing it in 2023, 24, and 25. And the other thing is for the park committee, tomorrow is the virtual public forum where we're going to go over the on-street parking regulations, paid kiosk, overnight parking, possible parking garage kind of scenario. So I implore everyone to visit that tomorrow at 7 o'clock. It's Zoom only, and just provide some feedback and input on that, because it is it's going to help finalize things. There's only a couple meetings left, so time is running out for the community to give input on that. So tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, I hope to see about 200 squares, and we'll go from there. So thanks, Ann.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Chris. Mark?
Could I just ask a couple of questions of Chris, just follow-ups?
Yep.
Sort of Chris. Actually, of Jackie. Jackie, is the select board posted for tomorrow night? The park?
Mhm.
Okay, so select board members can attend if they choose to. Okay, great, thanks. And the second question, just back to the school committee just for a second. So what they were working on was not reducing full day K, right? It was the costs associated.
Yeah, so in 2023, it gets reduced to like 3,500. So the amount that residents would have to pay. And then it's like 2,650 and then 1,850, something like that. So it's a staggered. There was like 6 or 7 different plans that they were reviewing which one to go with. So that's the final choice. It's going to be presented, so it's still not fully approved. But
okay, so it's the cost proposals. Sorry, yeah, I heard it as full day K was coming down in 3 years. I was like, wait, no,
yeah.
I didn't think that was it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Carlo?
Thanks. Hello, everyone. So I got a request from Recreation Committee to be hopefully on our next agenda for a quick item. Turf One plans to be down for, to do the surface over and the track over. And they're pretty confident there's going to be a need for temporary lights at Coolidge. And we are the body to approve that. So they would like to get on the next agenda just to start preparing for that. So temporary lights at Coolidge. And I briefly attended CPDC, and the main highlight of the night, which has been at almost every meeting when they're on the agenda, is the Chute Street last corner Green Tomato building. CPDC still wants it scaled down a bit. The massing, the number of units, still a lot going on there. That's a long haul project. And I had the privilege of being on the interview committee for the final round for the DEI position. It's now in Amy Lannon's hands. The committee decided to narrow down the 3 candidates to finalists to 2. And we were tasked to provide our feedback to Amy, and Amy is going to make an offer to 1 that should be coming soon if it hasn't been done already. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Carlo. My only update is that the Ad Hoc Town Manager Screening Committee met again to approve outstanding minutes and to recommend to the select and voted to recommend to the select board that we, the select board, dissolve the screening committee at our discretion. They said, they didn't have a view as to whether we do it when Fidel comes on board following Bob's last day, but that's up to us. But they effectively feel like their job is done. So. Bob, do you have an update for us this evening?
Yes, thank you, Ann. I'd like to start by reading a statement that Town Council asked me to read. A request for the July 12th and August 10th, 2021 executive session minutes have been filed under public records law with the town clerk, and we reviewed the minutes and determined they were not ripe for release. The town clerk received a request for the January 18th, 2022 executive session minutes as well. Given that the minutes were not final, we determined that the notes, to the extent they existed, were also not ripe for release. I have a few other short comments. There's a vaccination clinic on February 3rd, 2 days from 9 to 11 at the Pleasant Street Center. Details are on the website, but please, you must pre-register online in order to be eligible. Certainly thanks to the DPW and facilities, especially for great work over the weekend. It was one of those 30-hour consecutive work days, something Fidel will be getting away from to some degree. They did a great job around town. It's never perfect, but that was an awful lot of snow in a pretty short amount of time. And then lastly, great minds think alike. TB12 and I both announced today that we're retiring. He was going to hold off till 7:15, but he just couldn't. Mine was not leaked as badly as his was. When I announced I was leaving last summer, I purposely didn't say that because a retirement announcement is not reversible. I really wanted to give the community every opportunity to find Fidel, and was willing to stay if I had to. But it's pretty clear to me that Fidel is going to hit the ground running at about 100 miles an hour, which is terrific. And I will be filing for retirement, or I've already done that. Fidel has met almost every person in Reading. I think there's 3 or 4 left that he's going to try to meet with next week. And I really look forward to having him join us in less than 10 days. That's all. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Bob, and congratulations on your retirement. And we're also very pleased and not surprised to hear of Fidel's efforts to date. So thank you both. Do we have public comment this evening? I see Jean Borowski's hand. Jean?
Thank you so much. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Jean Borowski on Johnson Woods Drive. I'm also a member of the Finance Committee. I'd like to address a comment that was made at the last Select Board meeting, but I do want to be clear, the FinCom has not met since your last meeting. So I am speaking completely as an individual, not on behalf of any other FinCom member, and certainly not on behalf of the body. At your last meeting, some concerns were raised about how the Finance Committee came to create an ARPA subcommittee. And at one point it was said FinCom rushed into this and did not consult with the Select Board. And I just want to clarify that FinCom's been working on this for the past 5 months. I would qualify our meeting over the last 5 months in open public meetings as diligent and very careful. I would qualify it as the opposite of rushed. And in terms of collaborating with the Select Board, we certainly attempted to. In late October, we had a joint meeting with the School Committee and Select Board to solicit feedback on a working group for the ARPA subcommittee. And we are actually able to incorporate a lot of that into the final subcommittee that was created in November. And in fact, the Select Board chair was at that meeting and participated very productively before we took that vote. So the reason I'm speaking tonight is obviously ARPA funds fall completely to the Select Board, and you should take whatever time you need tonight to change directions if that's the right thing to do, and to be comfortable with whatever advisory board you put together. So you have my full support on that. In fact, I'm going to stay in the meeting and be here if it's helpful at all during that part of the discussion. But I'm enormously proud of the work that the Finance Committee has done to this point, and I do want to make sure that the community has an accurate understanding of that work. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Jean. Other public comment? All right, seeing none, let us move to the next agenda item. Next up, we have one item on our consent agenda, which is to vote to appoint the town accountant to a term from July 2022 to June 2023. Mark, do I hear a motion from you?
You do. Let me, if I could just add a little bit more information to what you started just with the more specific dates. So the motion is move to appoint Sharon Angstrom as town accountant for a term July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023.
Thank you, Mark. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Any discussion? Mark.
Thanks, Ann. I will sound like a broken record on this. I think that Sharon does an amazing job as the town accountant, and most certainly deserves to be reappointed for the term. Whenever I have requested information. I get it very quickly and accurately with description of what's going on. And I think she's performing the function very well for the select board, who she reports to, and that's the reason we're making the motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I agree wholeheartedly. Other comments from members of the board? Chris?
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, I agree with Ann and Mark. Obviously, Sharon's done an amazing job. And I'm very happy to see her staying here and continuing until my birthday next year. Hopefully many more after that. So thank you, Sharon, and happy early birthday to me.
Any further comment or discussion? All right, hearing none. As you appear on my screen, Mark,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
and Anne, yes. Right.
And you're on mute.
Sorry. Next, I would ask Sharon if she would provide us with the quarterly update. Did you hear my vote? Yes. Okay, very good. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. I just want to thank all of you for your support. I really enjoy working for Reading. I'm looking forward to another year. So thank you. I also wanted to take a moment to publicly thank Bob for all of his support. You know, I've worked here for 10 years and he's made it a wonderful place to work. His leadership has been incredible. He's always got his door open for all of us, and he's a busy man and he always makes time for us. So I just want to let him know that, you know, we appreciate all that he's done for us, and I personally appreciate all he's done for us, and he has a wonderful retirement. So with that, I want to start my report. I'm going to start with the OPEB peer report, or the OPEB report that you got in your packet, but I actually have summarized it with our peer communities. So I'm going to share my screen if you don't mind. Let's see if it will let me. Can you all see that? Yes, okay, good. So what I did with the report that you had in your packet is I chose to pick out the peer communities that we consider to be like us and see where they are with funding percentages. But before I do that, I wanted to kind of explain kind of where all these numbers are coming from, so you understand the report a little bit better. So measurement date is the date that the last actuarial evaluation was done. And so it varies across all the different communities. So that can be a little bit of a reason for some issues in comparative. Total OPEB liability is essentially the total OPEB liability for all of our retirees. It's like a projection of what it could be for all our employees and all our retirees to the day they die. And so that is the total liability. The fiduciary net position is the money that's in our trust fund. How much is there at the current time when they're doing this report? And then the net OPEB liability is the difference between your total and your fiduciary net position. So it's your unfunded liability. And then of course, the funded ratio is essentially taking your fiduciary net position. And I'm sorry. I thought I heard something.
I'd just ask if folks are not speaking, if you could put yourselves on mute, please.
Okay. Sorry about that. So the fiduciary net position divided by the total OPEB liability will give you your funded ratio. So these are our 23 peer communities, and I've highlighted Reading in a bold. This report was as of June 30th, 2020, and we had a total liability of just over 73 million. We had just over $6 million in our OPEB trust fund, and our net OPEB liability was just over 67 million, and we're 8.3% funded. This blended discount rate, this is our investment return that the actuary used, and they base it on what they expect the investment return to be on the money that we've got in our trust fund. And it's a higher number because we are invested with PRIT now, and we have been for a couple of years now, I'd say. And so that's going to be, you know, a number that they can either go up and down with. I feel like it probably will go down because the pension one, PARIC, had advised us to bring our discount rate down to 7. So I could see that number in future valuations going down, which kind of drives up, you know, your net OPEB liability because you're expected to get less from your investments. So looking at this, there are 8 communities. I ranked them in order of their funded ratio. So you can see Dedham is 28.3% funded, and we're at 8.3. We are 9th on the list. So there are 8 communities out of our peer communities that are better funded for OPEB than we are. 1 that's the same as us, and then 14 that are lower than us. And this information, like I said, is of June 30th, 2020. So I do have another slide I want to show you, just to show you where we are as of June 30th, 2021. So I'm going to stop sharing this. If I can, there we go. And I'm going to bring up that. So this is our GASB 74-75 report done by Siegel, and it shows you that at June 30th, 2021, we now have just over $8.3 million in our trust fund, and we're at 12.87%. So our money going in, plus all the investment returns we have had with PRIT, have brought us along pretty quickly from where we were 1 year ago. So it's encouraging to see that the returns that we're getting from PRIT are much more than what we've been getting in the past, and will help us in getting this fully funded. The other thing I wanted to mention is that with the OPEB liability, our enterprise funds, the water, sewer, stormwater, and the light department, all of them are able to fully fund their annual required contribution to fully fund their liability within a 30-year period. In fact, they'll probably be fully funded about the time that we're fully funding our pension. But the general fund liability is too large. We put $500,000 pretty much at a minimum each year, but we need like $2 million every year to fully fund our annual required contribution. So every time we have a valuation done, it's an open schedule. They do another 30 years because we're not every year putting in what that schedule is asking of us. The hope is that when we're fully funded with the pension, that we will be able to redirect some of these funds into OPEB and get us further along in getting this fully funded. And I usually mention that, but where Fidel's here, I figured I'd mention it again, so that we know what the plan is going forward. I'm going to stop sharing the screen.
Mark, I see you have a question.
Thanks, Ann. Sharon, just a quick question back on that slide. Why did our OPEB liability drop so much? I know that the investment return helped kind of our net funded amount, but the liability dropped like $10 million. How'd that happen?
That's an interesting thing. I can ask Siegel, but my guess is that we probably had people pass away. There's some improvements on the table in terms of mortality. So there could be some shift there. That's an interesting point. I didn't notice that, but definitely something I can do some research and let you know. But it's an ever-changing document. They make a lot of assumptions, and then they address those assumptions every time they do an update. And the numbers change every time they do the update. So we could have had less employees. People move around a lot. And so the people who are on our plan, who are going to be our responsibility in retirement, changes as people move on and move away from Reading in terms of working here or someplace else. So that could be part of it. But it is a very key point that you mentioned. I didn't even notice myself, and I definitely would like to know the answer. So I'm going to ask that question for you, and I'll get back to you.
Chris.
Thanks, Ann. Just a quick question. Not that I care about Natick and Stoneham as opposed to Reading, but why are they at 0% on theirs? Why is there?
A few years back,
but
a few years back, I did do like a survey of our peer communities to see where they are in relation to, what their plans were for funding OPEB when we were trying to put our OPEB funding policy together. And many communities said to us, we're trying to get our pension fully funded and then we'll redirect. We're not going to worry about it now. We're going to redirect once, let's put all of our funding towards getting our pension fully funded. So some have taken that approach. We've been putting in the entire time I've been here with Reading, trying to put as much as we can in, because you never know when this is going to be mandated of us. I mean, the pension is mandated. We do have to fund the pension. right now the OPEB is not required of us, but we certainly see that number grow, and you can see how much those communities who have zero in, they're pushing the can down the road, and you can see how big their liability is. It's amazing that they haven't put anything in, because it just seems like that number is growing and growing, and then their peers are putting them in. So it just does make you look a little bit less responsible about these liabilities when you can see your peers doing, doing whatever they can to fund this. They're not following the crowd, but they've got a different philosophy on how they're doing. They're like, let's put the extra in so that we can get to the pension being funded first and then redirect. We're seeing that same philosophy. We're going to redirect just as well, but we try and put as much as we can into this so that there's something there to grow.
Perfect. Yeah, it's good to see us in the top 10. So
yeah, and not bad.
Yeah.
And I feel like the auditors have a lot of positive comments about the way that we do things here in Reading in terms of funding things like OPEB and how quickly we pay off debt and how little debt we carry. So that's important to note that, bond rating agencies do look at how seriously you address these liabilities.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks. Okay.
Thanks. Just a quick question, Sharon. I noticed that first slide was, 20-something cities and towns, and we were number 8. Do you know how we rank in the state? Are we top 50? Are we top 25? Do you have any idea?
I don't have any idea because I only pulled our peers, but I certainly can do that if that's of interest to you, just to see where we are, because I feel like the auditors have a lot of praise for us. So I would guess that we're up there. So many are on the lower numbers, not doing much in terms of funding. I mean, it's not a lot that we're funded, but we're taking it seriously, and we're proactively trying to fund where some communities haven't even begun. So yeah, I can do that for you if that's of interest.
Yeah, just curious, and I'm glad you mentioned the bond rating, because Bob and staff and you and anyone involved in finances has brought us to a level where we just save money when we borrow money, and that's not an easy thing to do, or not many towns have that privilege. So I'm glad that's continuing, and other people notice, and hopefully that will carry on for years to come. Thanks.
Done with this slide. Let's see if I can get this slide to go down.
And Sharon, I'm not seeing the screen shared anymore.
Okay, then I must have shut it down. But it won't let me get back to my. It's like my screen is frozen. Hold on a sec. Oh, there you are. I just got a little picture of Anne over here, and that's it. I'm like, where's the Zoom? Okay, I'm going to share another screen.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm just going to share our select board packet, because all the stuff I want to talk about is in this packet, and start at the beginning.
Excuse me, Sharon, we're seeing your kind of your list of files. Is that what you're hoping to show us right now?
Oh, sorry. I'm looking at something different, so I obviously clicked on the wrong thing. They're so small. Can you see it now? Sorry about that. All right. So the first item I wanted to discuss is our revenues as of January 26, 2022. And this report is meant to show you what we were looking like last year at the same time, so we can get an idea comparatively where we stand. And it's done by category, so you can see the types of revenues. So up at the top, I tell you that these numbers here are actual collections through January 31st, 2021. And over here, current year collected this month through 1/26/22. So there's a difference about a week. But you can see that our collection percentages are about 63.5% compared to 66.24% last year. A little bit lower, but still well within my expectations. I usually look at these revenues and say, okay, if I collected these revenues equally across, every month, where would I be percentage-wise? That would be about 58%. So we're well in line with where we need to be to meet projection, but slightly lower than where we were last year. The other thing I do is I take a look at these percentages and start drilling in at things that look a little bit different than I would expect or lower than I would expect. And one thing that always stands out is motor vehicle excise tax in January, because 6 months by, you're like, wow, 12%, that doesn't seem like much. And the reason for that is motor vehicle excise tax, the first commitment for the year for fiscal 22 doesn't go out until like February, late January, sometime in February, and we wait for the DMV to send us a file. So that is very typical. So all the revenues you see, that $498,000 that's there for motor vehicle excise is all commitments from prior years. And the first commitment will go out February, and you'll start to see those numbers go up. So that being an important distinction to recognize. So like I said, I don't feel that there's any concern for a revenue deficit here. We're well in line with projection, and that's the reason to show you this slide, that we're doing well and there's no concern. This next report is the general fund expenses, and this is run by budgetary or department that we vote at town meeting. And I try and run it like this so that you don't see too much information, but you can get the gist of how we look at it in terms of town meeting, in terms of we vote at salary and expenses. So I run it that way, and I run it at a summary level so you don't have to see all the accounts that make it up. And I do that same sort of analysis, especially for things like salaries. Am I over that 58%? Because salaries do tend to be, even across the year. And then I highlight anything that looks off to that thought process and drill into it. The one thing you'll notice is I've highlighted this 69.9% under administrative services for expenses. Now, expenses they don't necessarily get spent evenly, but it is over the 58%. So I wanted to, see what made that up. And it's a lot of the town manager hiring process that's in there that wasn't part of the original budget. And we also had an assessment center for the police department for promotions. So those things aren't every year sort of things. And so they kind of tend to bring things up a little bit. So that's but still not really a concern. It might be something we ask for at town meeting, additional funding to cover those expenses, unless we have excess in other areas. Not a lot to talk about here, but there is other areas I've highlighted. So I'm going to scroll down. The regional school assessments, I always look at this because sometimes we're off in what we budget for regional schools. We don't always know how many students are at the regional schools when we're making the budgets. We never know, and so we always have to look at them and determine if we're okay. The reason we're a little bit high here is last year we had a problem. I think it was with Essex North. They sent us one bill and it has 2 payments on it. And we almost missed the second payment last year because they don't send another bill when the other payment is due. So this year we paid the full bill, both payments at once, to avoid that happening. So we kind of paid the whole year for Essex North already. So that's why that percentage is higher than usual. And that's the general fund. There was nothing out of the ordinary, so that's a good thing. This is the water fund. Again, we're looking at revenues, and I show you last year at the same time, January 31st, 2021, at that just under 5.3, and then this year at 126.22, just under $4.9 million, 67.2% collected for our projection, which is still well in line with my expectations, but lower than last year. My thoughts are that last year more people were working from home and probably used a little bit more water last year, and that's why we had more coming in last year by this time. I think more people are going into the office more, so I think the revenues probably went down for that reason, but still no concern of a revenue deficit in the water fund. And the expenses for water, oops, sorry, I didn't beat you there. The only item I really was concerned about was looking at the debt service and making sure our budget was correct. Because we're at 70%, but like I said, some things aren't spread evenly across the year. Debt service, the payments vary throughout the year. So I wanted to make sure our remaining budget was enough to cover the debt service payments that remain in fiscal 22, and there is more than enough money there. The other thing I noticed is this $10,140, the wrong debt issuance cost expense account was used, and it belongs up here. So that's what I notate down here, just telling you that I'll move it up. But this was the first time I noticed it. Nothing to be concerned about in terms of expenses going over. The percentages seem reasonable. Capital is one where the percentages tend to be high, because in capital, we're either purchasing something very large, and once we purchase it, it's expended. And a lot of times that's done in the beginning of the year, depending on what it is. And then when we award a contract, it's for the whole amount. And so it's not unusual to see that percentage be high. I'm more concerned when the number is low, because it means maybe somebody forgot to start the process to spend that money. This is the sewer revenue, same thing. We're at 71.5% collected from projection. Last year, we're at 84. Also, the other thing that's to keep in mind is I think that we did have some, I don't know if that was true of our enterprise funds, but we did kind of go a little more conservative during the pandemic in terms of our revenue projections, but it doesn't seem that way looking at this. Again, I'm thinking that the revenues are lower this year because of people being at home. Also, the fact that this report has got like a week lag. This is January 31st, 2021. This is January 26th. So there's some differences there, but still well in line with my expectations to make projection. No concerns for a revenue deficit. These are the expenses. Everything seemed well in line here, not much to discuss. Looking at the debt, it's a little bit higher, but there was definitely enough money in there to cover the remaining debt service payments, so I had no concern. And stormwater. Stormwater is at 71.9% for revenues. Last year it was at 73, pretty much close in line, well above expectations to make projection, no concern for revenue deficit. And again, the only number that stood out for expenses in stormwater was debt. So I went in it to make sure that what we have remaining is enough. We have one debt service payment left of $18,600, so it's perfect. And that's the extent of the financial update, which brings us to the memo I put in your packet. I had a couple action items I wanted to address with you guys in terms of two of them related to ARPA funds. So the health department was looking to do a distribution for COVID testing kits, and we did not have funding to utilize for that. So I had to go to FinCom to get FinCom reserves, because the CARES funding ended October 31st. And I think there was that expectation that we would just begin using ARPA funds, but we haven't had any meetings to discuss how to break that money down. So I haven't allowed anybody to utilize it. So to alleviate this situation, I was requesting an allocation for ARPA funding to cover mitigation type expenses, public health like expenses of $250,000, so that we have money that we can spend in the interim before you have those meetings, if you feel comfortable. The other alternative is to just possibly fund the $80,000 that we've already expended, and I can put the expense to the grant. So that's the first consideration. The second is to remind you that the $2 million for the Auburn water tank is a ban we issued, and it will be coming due in December of 2022. And so we need to know by September if we plan to use any ARPA funds, because if we need to borrow or ban for that money by December, we need to start that process sometime in September. We have about 3 months lead time to borrow, because there's a lot of official statement updating that we have to do. And so I just wanted to remind the board that if we could at least get some kind of feedback on what the board plans to do with the Auburn water tank by September, that would be very helpful, because I don't want to ban and spend money to ban because we don't know. If we can get an answer, that would be great. So that's the second thing. The third thing was I spoke to Karen Herrick a few weeks back when we were about to sign Fidel's contract, and she was asking me if we had enough budget to fund Bob and Fidel at the same time for the 2 weeks. And then I had to consider all the things that we'll be paying, you know, in terms of the overlap, Fidel's new salary, Bob's salary to the date that he leaves, and then his big that we have to pay at the end. And we were pretty close, maybe a $10,000 shortage that I'll have to ask for at town meeting, which is not uncommon. Vacation buybacks is something that we regularly go to town meeting for, because we never know when that's going to happen. We don't put excess in our budget for that sort of thing. But this came up because I wanted to make sure I covered everything that could possibly be needed before April town meeting. And the charter reads that the town manager is entitled to termination pay if he gives more than a 60-day written notice. I have not discussed this with the board, so I wanted to be sure that you guys were aware of it. It's up to you guys whether you want to do anything with this at all, but I wanted to make sure that if you had intent, that I know something about the amount that you might be thinking about prior to town meeting, so I can move funding around or ask for free cash or whatever has to be done at April town meeting. So I just want to make sure that you guys were aware of this, because I wasn't necessarily aware of it, and I wanted to make sure that we're prepared if you do plan on doing this for April town meeting to ask for what we need. And that is all I have. Also, I think I mentioned down here, just for precedent or historical sake, I did pull up, and it is in your packet. We only had one other prior town manager, so I wanted to see what we did for Peter, and we did give him 3 months severance pay. And I included that copy of the minutes from that meeting where they agreed to that in your packet. So if you have any intent in this direction, I would need to know something before town meeting, ideally before March 1st, so that I could get it into the warrant. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Sharon. Questions or comments from the board regarding this report? Sharon, I did have a couple of questions or suggestions. One relating to, let's see, what was point 2? You could scroll back up. Oh,
Point 2 was the ban for the water.
Right,
So
right. My recommendation on that, Sharon, is just given that in April, the board is going to reorganize, I might just in April, once the board has reorganized, shoot a message to the new chair and to Fidel just to refresh everyone's recollection that this needs to happen, just because the new chair will be setting the agenda in consultation with the new town manager.
okay. The one thing I did fail to mention that I wanted to mention to you, and I don't know why I didn't put it in the memo, but recently I did receive the ARPA final rule, which had some changes to the interim rule. And one of the major changes that was there is that under the loss of revenue category, you have a choice to use a standard allowance of $10 million or use the calculation. In both instances, the amount I come up with is more than what we've been awarded, which means you could use the entire grant as loss of revenue, and gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of how you use it. I obviously think that the intent of the grant is to help with recovery, so I wouldn't recommend not doing the mitigation efforts, but it gives you a lot more flexibility in how you use it. Prior to that, I didn't know what we were going to be able to use it for, to use all that money. It's going to give you a lot more flexibility. You still can't use it to fund pensions. You still can't use it to pay debt service in the general fund. We could have used it for the water, for the enterprise funds. So there's still some limitations, but the loss of revenue category is much more wide open. It's more to fund your operating budgets. because you're saying we lost the revenue over the course of the pandemic, and this is to add back our staff, or this is whatever the case might be. So I think that that's an important distinction. I did do the calculation for loss of revenue. It came up to like $8 million. And then I was like worried I did it wrong. I sent it to the auditors. They made a few adjustments, but still in that realm of about what we got was what we had for loss of revenue. So that's good news in terms of flexibility, in terms of how we use it. And I just wanted to mention that.
Sharon, you don't need to go through the full 8 million, but what are some of the examples of loss of revenue that we experienced as a result of the pandemic?
The one thing that worked in our favor is the base year was fiscal 19 and we had the override. And then they build off that. They expect that your revenues are going up a certain percentage every year. And we were building off a number that was larger to be. So I don't recall exact things that were lower, but I can certainly compile that for you. But the way that they did it was more of a template style where you put all your revenues in, and it wasn't really necessarily highlighting an area that was deficient. It was looking at your revenues in total. So I can certainly drill into some of those numbers if that's important for you to know. But I think the big thing is we don't have to do that loss of revenue calculation. We can use it however we want in terms of supporting the operating budgets with less restriction. I shouldn't say whatever we want, but
right.
It gives it as an expanded use for it. You're not having to justify as strongly. This relates to the pandemic because it gives us a little bit more of a wide open kind of, you're saying your operating budgets have been reduced and you can fund your operating budget to some extent with some of this funding.
And with respect to the last point about what kind of payout would be appropriate for Bob, I don't know if you have any numbers off the top of your head, and I don't expect that you would. If you do, I'd certainly be welcome to hear them now. But if you have a sense of what the town could, reasonably afford, and maybe that's a conversation to take offline and bring back to the board.
Well, I can tell you that a 3-month payout for Bob would be closer to 50,000, and I'm sure that we could find it somewhere within our budget, maybe without, because a lot of times we use any excess in benefits to help fund other line items, so we may not need to use free cash for it. But it's all about what you guys think is appropriate. It's not really about what I think is appropriate. And we do have a healthy free cash balance. So I think we could still, if we couldn't find it within our budget at April town meeting, we could use free cash as well. Because it is a one-time payment, which is kind of what free cash is for. But we do tend to move a lot of things around at April town meeting and not necessarily use free cash. So I would have to look and see what excesses we have to speak to that. But in comparison, if you're looking at what we gave Peter, the relative number would be about 49,000 and change.
Okay. I see that, and this is certainly something we could take offline or consult with town council. I saw in the minutes from the previous board that they had a number of amendments to the employment agreement in conjunction with their award.
Interesting. I didn't go to that. I was just looking for how did they address this for Peter and what did they end up with? Because I think that based on what I did see in the minutes, they did for his last year increase his salary by 5%, but the budget was, I think, 2%. And so they were wondering, we have to go and ask for money for this, it looked like, because they were going to award him for that last year more money. And then that that 3-month severance was based off that newer salary. So there were several comments from different select board members that they felt that they had underpaid Peter for a number of years.
I saw that. Okay. Thanks. Any other questions or comments from the board? And Sharon, okay, so you would need an answer from us by March 1st. So
because that's when the warrant closes. So that would be the best way to hopefully get it in by then, because then we would have everything in the warrant book and there wouldn't be anything being added at town meeting on the floor or anything like that. We could do it. I think it's much more transparent to put things in the warrant book.
Okay, so we have a meeting on the 15th and a meeting on the 1st. Okay, so if we did it on the 1st, is that,
That would be fine, I think, as long as, like Bob could probably speak to it, as long as you close the warrant after, I would think that that would be okay.
okay,
But it would be nice to have a discussion about it. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we need to do. I don't want there to be any surprises. And if we can do this in advance of April town meeting, that would be good.
okay. Thank you, Sharon. Appreciate your flagging that for us.
Thanks.
All right, I see that I'm wondering actually with Sharon with us, if it makes sense to skip ahead slightly in our agenda to the item where we discuss voting to allocate approximately 80,000 of the local and county ARPA grant funds to the purchase of COVID test kits. I know that recommendation or had a recommendation in her report that would modify that slightly to expand both the dollar amount and provide some more flexibility in the allocation. So I don't know, if Mark, if you want to open it up with a motion and then we can discuss.
Yeah, excuse me, Anna, I just had a quick question for Sharon before
Sure.
you actually handle part of it. So the 80 is on our agenda. And the 250, the 80 would be part of that 250. If we
Yes.
allocated anything, if we allocated more than 80, say we did 200, that 80 that is kind of needed would be part of that 200.
Mhm.
Okay.
That is correct.
All right, and then the water tower, I know it'll be a future discussion, but the 2 million, it could be $1 million of ARPA, it could be $500,000, it could be whatever. And
Yeah, I
that's
just
it.
wanted to put it on your radar that there is a
Yeah.
time frame, a shorter time frame for that water tank discussion. And I'll definitely remind you, I just wanted to put it out there since I had the quarterly report to mention that we have a shorter timeline with that because it does take time to put borrowing up. So,
All right, thanks. I'm done, thanks.
So I could, oh, Ann, you're muted.
Thanks. I was just about to say, I see we have been joined by Karen Herrick, our chair. Karen, do you want me to finish out this agenda item or would you like to, shall I hand the virtual gavel over to you now?
No, Anne, I'm sure you're doing a great job. Why don't you keep going?
Okay. We skipped ahead a little bit while we had Sharon just to discuss the allocation for COVID test kits or other public health expenses.
Okay, so you're at 9 o'clock.
Yes. So
Okay, thank you.
we had wrapped up Sharon's report and are moving to that, which was, and this relates to part of her report and one of the recommendations she had made there. Okay, Mark, I think you had a question or comment?
Yeah, so just to clarify, we're gonna, what you're suggesting, Ann, is we move forward just to this one item and then go back after, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure of that. So I can make a motion and then we can go through seconds and see if there is discussion. So the motion would be vote to approve allocating $80,000 of ARPA funds towards the cost of COVID-19 test kits.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mark.
Thanks, Ann. So it's a little awkward to kind of bring this item up here now, but I think we should kind of have this discussion. I think that one of the big purposes of the ARPA funds is in fact to take care of emergency needs, and certainly COVID test kits to me fits that about as squarely as anything else could. So I actually think that it makes sense to look at a bigger number and maybe even bigger than the 200 or 250. And I had intended to make this part of the later discussion, but I can make it part of the earlier discussion also. I really think that there are certain categories that the board should consider in terms of what we want to do with ARPA funds. And as kind of came up earlier, we, the select board, are empowered to make decisions on how to spend that money. So I think that there's this category of emergency stuff. We should allocate an amount larger than the $80,000. We can talk about what it should be, but my opinion is it should be larger than the 80 to take care of this kind of stuff so that it doesn't have to go through strange machinations to take money from FinCom reserves or whatever else. This is priority. This is exactly what that money is for. That's kind of category one. There are some other things I think we may want to think about. I'll save those for kind of the later discussion, but I would make an amendment to this motion to raise the dollar amount to $500,000.
Thank you, Mark. Discussion on Mark's amendment to the motion. Carlo.
Thanks. I agree with Mark 100%, except for the amount. I think for right now, for me, that's a little high. I was gonna go to an even 200, but I'm okay with the 250. But I think 500 is a big chunk out of the 7 million, and we may have to address this again. But I think right now, it seems like what's in front of us, the 250 covers the 80, and then we have 170 left, and I think that's a nice amount of money to help augment and, you know, not have to come back to us and, you know, FinCom reserves, just like you said, Mark. So I agree with Mark's sentiments and statements, but not the amount. So I'm okay with the 250, a little bit more, but I'm okay with no more than 250 at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. Other discussion. Karen.
Just a quick procedural. Do we need a second on that amendment?
Yes, I think we do need a second on the amendment. Thanks.
Okay,
Karen.
so second.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion, Chris.
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, I'm fine with increasing the money as well. I think 500 was way too high. I'm comfortable with 250. I think more importantly, hopefully I keep saying COVID going away February, March, and then the need for test kits on some fourth variant or whatever, like, just is going to diminish. So I understand the initial batch that we'll have and whatnot, and then some other issues that are going to arise down the road. You know what I mean? We can always allocate the money back, right? If we did 250 and we did 150 on test kits, like, we still have the money. So, I mean, I think without having to go back and borrow money from other places, 250 sounds right for me. So I'm good with that.
Sharon, is that right? If we allocated 250 to test kits and then, you know, by a stroke of good fortune, we don't have the need to spend more on public health needs before the ARPA funds expire, would we be able to retrieve that allocation and reallocate it elsewhere? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. It's just so that I have some flexibility as things come up.
Oh, that's really helpful to know.
I can give you an update of where we're at, and I wouldn't go over the 250 you're allowing. Obviously, I get close to it, I would come back to you. But when we sit down and we have that ARPA conversation, I can tell you where we are at in terms of that money you've allocated. And if you want to reallocate at that time, any portion of that, you would be free to do that.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Other comments? Karen.
Thank you, Ann. So I'm thinking we are kind of approaching the end of the fiscal year. So I don't know that 500 may come up. I'd like anticipating that the next time Sharon, if there's an emergency purchase before her next quarterly update, that's great. Otherwise, she could give us, this could be part of the quarterly update. You know, where are we with the COVID ARPA funds? So 250, 300, that I think, well, as a person who had to work with the town manager to put the agenda together, I will say it was not a lot of time and energy to put another agenda item to say we need more money. So if we do need more money, we can do that, and I'm sure the next chair will be happy to do that.
Mark.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks, fellow board members, for the feedback. I would be happy to withdraw my suggested amendment and would be comfortable with a 250 kind of number as other people had suggested if someone else wants to make that amendment. So let me remove my amendment from the floor.
Keep your amendment on the floor if you wouldn't mind, and I will offer a friendly amendment to change the 500 to 250,000.
I would accept that friendly amendment.
Very good. And what do we have right now, Mark, in terms of the motion, in terms of what the allocation is supposed to be for? What does it say?
Right now, it's specific to the cost of COVID-19 test kits.
Okay. And Karen, I mean, excuse me, not Karen, Sharon, what is the recommended language you would say that would provide you with flexibility within the bounds of, COVID-19 and public health needs that arise thereof?
I would say COVID mitigation expenses. So that would be
Okay.
open to PPE if needed, sanitation if needed. We haven't been doing as much. I mean, I know during the heart of the pandemic, if somebody tested positive, we were doing a deep clean of a building. If somebody tested positive, I don't think that we're doing as much of that as we had been. So that would be included in there. But I do think that the COVID testing kits may be needed more. I mean, I feel like every week I'm getting calls by the school telling me my child has been exposed to COVID and that they're going to test him every day. So I feel like these test kits are something that we're going to have a need for a while, I think. So it could be testing kits, but I'd like the language to be a little bit more wide open to allow for other things that keep the spread of COVID down.
Okay.
Would you like a rereading that would include a friendly amendment to accommodate what Sharon has suggested?
That would be lovely. Thank you, Mark.
Vote to approve allocating $250,000 of ARPA funds toward the cost of COVID mitigation expenses.
Second.
Or actually, the cost shouldn't be there, toward COVID mitigation expenses.
Second.
Very good. I think since it was your own amendment, I think you were friendly. That was a friendly to your own amendment. So I think that means we're going to be voting on Mark's amendment, and then we need to vote again on the underlying motion. So,
Just point of clarification. So
Yeah.
the amendment is first the 250K, and then the second would be 250K and COVID mitigation.
no, the first would be 250K and COVID mitigation, the amendment to the original motion, which you made and was seconded.
Sorry, so
And then you would go to approve it after
Then we have
that. So
to
you're voting on the
approve the
amendment and then you
motion.
to approve it or deny it.
got it.
So we had a motion. The motion was there was a motion to amend the motion. We need to approve that amendment, that motion to amend. Then we have to approve the underlying motion. Okay.
Yep. Oh, that makes sense.
All those in favor of the amendment? Chris?
Oh, no, yes. I was saying yes.
Yeah, you were saying your vote is yes?
Yes. Yeah.
Mark?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Carlo?
Yes.
And yes, the amendment is approved. Now can we approve the original motion as amended? Chris?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Carlo?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
And your vote, Ann?
Yes, and yes. Thank you. All right. I think I can now hand the gavel back to the original Madam Chair, Karen Herrick.
All right, thank you.
And so where we left off before I jumped ahead, Karen, is to follow the town accountant quarterly update. So the next item on the agenda is reviewing and voting to amend the select board policy.
Okay, may I ask a question? And I apologize, I did join late. If you already covered it, I'll go back and watch it. Sharon, were you able to give the board an update on the lost revenue component of ARPA? Okay.
Yes, I did. Just a brief update, just to go over the fact that there's this standard allowance of $10 million that wasn't there before. So our grant is under 10 million. So that whole grant could be looked at as lost revenue and gives it a little bit more flexibility in terms of how it's used.
Oh, wow. That's a lovely bit of news. I'm sorry I missed it. Thank you for repeating it. Okay, thanks. All right. And okay, so next, I believe we have Ivrea on the call. So we're going to review and vote to amend Select Board Policy Section 1.3.3, process for evaluating the town manager, and Section 6.2, evaluation of the town manager. These changes were in the packet. I could open up for any discussion by board members. I see it. Did I see a hand? Yes, Carlo. Sorry, the screen switched on me.
That's okay. Yeah, can you open it? I just had one question so far. Yes. It was on adopting a subcommittee for something. It was definitely something new and it was highlighted.
So Carlo, maybe stop talking about 1332. It says that the board may assign the process review to a subcommittee who will hold public meetings on the subject. Is that what you're referencing, Carlo?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're just clarifying here that if the board wants to, it's may assign, there's no obligation to do so, but you could assign the review to a subcommittee.
Yeah, all right. I get it. It has the word may in there, but it's just, I don't know. It doesn't really make too much sense to me. I know what it says, but if it's up to us, it's up to us. I mean, I don't get it.
So these suggested amendments are just that, suggested amendments. So we can definitely revise them tonight. We can do another round of edits. I think maybe it might be helpful, Karen, to just also take a step back. There's sort of two things that are being looked at here is the goal setting component. How does the town manager set their goals? And then how do we evaluate? And what triggered this is that the new town manager's contract, Fidel's, has different evaluation processes that is currently laid out in the town in the select board's policies. So we had to revisit the select board's policies to make sure there wasn't inconsistencies between the two documents. So this is an opportunity for the board to look at its policies and think about whether there might be a better way of doing it, provided that anything in the policy still complies with what's in Fidel's contract. We don't want to create a conflict. What I have here are just the bare minimum changes. If the board wants to provide additional detail or more specificity about certain provisions, we can definitely add that here. And that's why I wanted to have this discussion to hear from the select board. In addition, Karen, if you could let me share my screen for just 1 second.
Yeah, I think Bob is sharing his screen. So
oh, okay. Let me see. All right. So I just wanted to highlight, so Donna Brewer in my office originally looked at this and made the changes. I think it might make sense to add a couple additional changes. The first is in this provision here, it says prior to the end of the calendar year, the town manager shall submit in writing to the select board for discussion, mutual approval list of goals and need priorities. Fidel is starting on the 14th and there are no goals. And so I think we need to have some clarity about what would happen in the first year. So we may want to add some language that says something like, provided, however, where a new town manager is appointed, the town manager shall submit goals within 30 days of appointment, and such goals shall be effective from the date of select board approval through March 1st or February 14th. And we can talk about why I have two dates here in a second, but I just wanted to highlight this as some additional clarity to help Fidel as he's onboarding to understand what his obligations are in terms of setting goals for the first review period. And Donna had originally down here made it so that the goals would be effective March 1st to February 28th annually. That that could create conflict. Fidel has to be reviewed by February 14th annually. So I would suggest that we amend this provision to read that the goals shall be submitted and approved by the select board by February 14th to be effective February 14th through February 13th annually. And then up here, we could use the February 14th date. So those are two additional changes I just wanted to put forward to the board. I apologize that we didn't catch them earlier, but I do think this will make it easier for Fidel to onboard, and then also moving forward for, you know, the goals to align with his review period.
Karen, there's some hands. Karen.
And go for it.
Or to that end, are most of the or all of the date changes that are reflected in the document to coincide with Fidel's start date effectively, and what that means for the course of the contract?
Correct, exactly. So evaluation forms need to be provided by January 15th for the review to be conducted February 14th. So everything is lining up. It is a bit, I would say, I'd say some town managers do their review on the fiscal year. So one option the board could, this isn't how we did it with Bob, but the board could tweak it so that the first year it's, you know, kind of unique, and then moving forward it switches to the fiscal year. It's a little strange because his contract requires review by February 14th. So, you know, I think you're either looking at it as review over a calendar year, February 14th to February 13th, or kind of, you know, a fiscal year review where we would have kind of a truncated year up front.
Yes, that part's a little confusing. And I think without thinking too much, I had figured that the board had decided the community goals, a general town manager goals, pretty much for this year. So that coming on, in my head, I was thinking a new town manager coming on, we would just finish out the fiscal year and start the process again. But so I appreciate you bringing this up. It's a huge amount of work for us to come up with completely new town manager goals. And we have a lot on our plate this spring, so I'm not sure how other board members feel about this. Mark?
You're on mute, Mark. Mark.
Thank you. It's a little awkward because the contract is going to stay February, even if we move to fiscal year goals. It's still going to say February. So that's just an awkward thing that we kind of have built in, it feels, right now. So I'm almost wondering if it makes more sense to stay with the contract time frame in terms of the goals that we set. To accept your suggestion, Ivrea, that within 30 days we establish kind of the first year's goals, because we can't have created them before now because we haven't. And some of them will be very similar, I think, to what we've already established, but some of them may be more specific to Fidel's kind of onboarding and other activities. And we did, in the contract, we did set up a 6-month review, correct, also?
Correct. So in the contract, it's within 30 days. There's sort of like a discussion between the town manager and the select board about entry plan goals and objectives. And then at 90 days, there's sort of an onboarding check-in. And then at 6 months, there's another review. But the full 360 review doesn't occur until, you know, it says no later than February 14th. So I do think the language of the contract with that no later than language does give the board some flexibility to shift when that review happens. But the intent in reading the contract clearly was that the review would happen kind of towards the beginning of the calendar year.
Yeah, so I think we probably need to work with that would be my suggestion. I wanted to offer a comment back on Carla, on your question on subcommittee also. I think that several years ago, within the last 5, there was kind of a change in the process, and the way that that was developed was a subcommittee was established. They worked on it first, and then they brought it back to the full board for approval. So I think that may have been what was thought of in the idea of you might want to have a subcommittee to work on this, and then the subcommittee come back to the full board. So I think that might be the why that might be considered that way, rather than trying to have the full board try to figure out the review initially. Let the subcommittee do the work first.
Yeah, can I respond? I think
Yes, Carlos.
that it's not the way I read it, as far as I agree with what you said just now, but the way I read it was we're just creating a subcommittee to solve a problem. And if it's a specific task, then I'm fine with it. But it was kind of, when the way I read it, and I read it, only like twice, it was kind of vague as far as the ask for the subcommittee, but maybe I'm wrong.
Or maybe we could tweak the language.
Yeah.
This board has had members team up on things, but not create subcommittees because of other previous members sharing with us the challenge of posting all those meetings, and that being a deterrent to getting work done. So does this language insist that it always be a subcommittee? Is this something that this is formal enough that we would be absolutely required to have a formal subcommittee?
No, it's just clarifying that to the extent a subcommittee is created, the subcommittee would have to follow the open meeting law. We can definitely remove this provision. It's discretionary. If it's creating confusions, it's not necessary. These are just policies. So at the end of the day, if the board wants to go a different direction, you're able to do so.
Okay, other comments from board members? I'll say that I read through these and they seem pretty straightforward. And if they are indeed policies and the board has a little flexibility to meet whatever the circumstances are within these policies, then I think I'm comfortable with Ivria's proposed suggestions. All right, I don't see any other comments. Are we ready for a motion?
Could I ask Ivria, could you kind of put the last version up? Because we don't actually have it. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, for sure. So the only changes from what is in the board packet is highlighted in yellow, adding this, and did the board want the goals provided within 30 days?
When is our next meeting? So we have 2 meetings in February, the second one, and then we're already into March. I think 30 days is extremely tight.
I do note that on our next agenda, there is an agenda item that is town manager goals. That is the designees for that conversation are both Bob and Fidel together. So we may actually start the conversation, be starting the conversation at our next meeting. So, and maybe we'd be able to sort of build off of that conversation. So 30 days may then be feasible. Maybe we'd want to make it 60 for a little bit more flexibility, but if we're actually going to be starting the conversation at the next meeting, that might allow for there to be a little bit of direction given by the board, such that Fidel could take that and run with it and come back to the board within 30 days.
Oh, Chris.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I agree with the 60-day thing. I think 30 would be a little too short. He's going to hit the ground running, but he's going to deal with 10,000 things, and just giving him a little bit more time to work on this, I think is feasible. So I'm good with the 60 instead.
Okay, I see a thumbs up from Mark. I am giving you a thumbs up. Carlos got a thumbs up too. Okay, great.
Would you like me to scroll down, Mark?
Yes, please. Were those the only two changes in yellow from what we've seen?
Yes, exactly. The black here is added, and then this here was changed from March to February to align with his review period.
Thank you.
And then the language down here was the one submitted with the board packet and mirrors what's in Fidel's current contract.
All right, Karen, you ready for a motion?
I think we are. Thank you, Mark.
Vote to amend Select Board Policy Section 1.3.3, process for evaluating the town manager, and Section 6.2, evaluation of the town manager as presented? As presented.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Chris. Any discussion?
When we say as presented, we mean on the screen.
Yeah, sorry, Mark, can you read did you say 3.3.1 and 3.3.2? Both provisions were amended.
So no, I did not. So I did
Sorry.
1.3.3 and 6.2.
Okay.
That's what it says on the agenda.
That works. That works. That's a broader, yeah, that works.
Okay. With no further discussion, I think we're ready for a vote. Board members, as I see you on the screen, Mark,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
and Karen, yes. Terrific. Okay. I don't want to say it too loudly, but we're on time. Okay. That's
Thank you
great.
guys. Bob, I'll send you the revised version so you have it. Have a good
Thank
night.
you, Ivrea. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Okay, next we return to discussion of ARPA. We have two items left then. Talk about the creation of an ad hoc ARPA advisory committee and discuss and vote to appoint the members. And I'd just like to take a second. I believe there was a misunderstanding put out there to the public regarding the planning process for this committee. And I'd just like to set the record straight. We learned about our ARPA funds 6 to 9 months ago. We've had 2 financial forums since then, where we, select board, met with, at the invitation of FinCom, met with the school committee and town officials to understand from the town accountant what these funds could be used for, understand our allocation. Sometime, I think it was in September, we learned that the select board would be allocating these funds to the purposes allowed. And then in the second financial forum, some of the select board, but not all, discussed conceptually, again, at the invitation of FinCom, with the school committee and town staff, how this committee might be staffed, what kind of resources or what kind of steps they might take in terms of getting community feedback and prioritizing. So that was all nicely captured in the FinCom meeting minutes, which I went back and reviewed. So we finally, as a group, discussed it formally, solely as a select board in January. And since then, I have gotten guidance from Mark, and we've worked closely with the chair and vice chair of the finance committee. We've pulled in, input from what other communities have done, Lexington, Andover among them. I've reviewed all of those meetings, the FinCom of financial forum of 10/20, the meeting of 11/4 and 12/1, I think it was. And we've had a couple of drafts So I would like to thank the Finance Committee for being so proactive in getting us organized about this and being willing to dedicate the financial forums to this very important topic, and being so helpful in giving us the feedback as we went through the process of deciding what a committee that was broad enough to really look at the full scope of what we could potentially do with the ARPA funds would look like. So that being said, I just wanted to thank the Finance Committee again, and the school committee and town staff for all their help. And before you have a draft charge that we could discuss at this point. So thanks. Mark.
Thanks, Karen. So, fellow members, I did a little bit of homework to see how do other communities work on this? How are ARPA funds being expended? Why? What kind of mechanisms they use? And Karen mentioned a couple of our neighbors that do it. By and large, there aren't really ARPA committees that I could find that are going on, at least in the Commonwealth. What there are instead, in some cases, are either a plan that's set out by the select board, and the select board, per this legislation, is the body that is supposed to decide how it's to be used. In some cases, they will go out and say, we're going to allocate X to this category, and then they may seek some input. And the input that they seek, that I found in a couple of communities like Winchester, is through a capital appropriations committee. And they give guidance to that committee, and the committee comes back with some thoughts and ideas on how the money should be expended. Wakefield had kind of a pronouncement that we have some ARPA funds, and the town council is going to be deciding how to expend those. And there is a button on the town website where you can send in your input if you have some thoughts on what you'd like to see the money get used for. So the net on this is that I think it's a good approach for us to kind of think about how we may see certain allocations take place, as we did tonight with $250,000 toward COVID, and then work collaboratively with other boards and residents to get some input, to see what thoughts they may have. And in thinking about the last committee, I think I shared my concern about how do we get the right structure for it. I believe strongly it should be advisory to the select board, because the select board is the group that has the final say in terms of what's going on. That it should be comprised of the elected boards. And the thought that is put forward here is that it would be 7 members. It would be 2 each from the select board, the finance committee, and the school committee, and 1 from the library board of trustees to get to the number of 7 and gather that input. And then what's attempted here is to make the charge very clear in terms of we, the select board, are seeking input from these other groups, as well as some key members of town staff, town manager, town accountant, school superintendent, school director of finance, to kind of offer some feedback and some guidance in terms of what's going on, and some thoughts on what kinds of things should happen. And it's fairly simple. I had been thinking it needs to be much broader. It's almost a thinking about how do we talk about capital that we want to consider. And I do think that at some point in time, we should talk about that. But I don't think we want to do that right now, because I think it's not thought through enough, and it may have a lot more complications to it. I think that getting guidance on some of the ARPA activities makes sense. I think it's important that we are able to do what we did tonight in terms of allocating funds for COVID. There may be other emergencies or high priority items that could fit into that category also. I personally think that there's a category of kind of smaller expenditures that we heard about from a number of different committees, kind of right as the budget process was coming to a close. There are a number of small projects that were there that aren't likely to get funded in this year's operating budget. They may or may not go in front of town meeting to get additional funds. And or we could consider some ARPA funds for some of those activities as well. I think that might be a good use of things. And that would leave the bulk of the ARPA funds to be kind of in this consideration where we're trying to get some feedback going through. So long story short, that's the reason why this is structured as it is, who the members are, how it comes in. It goes through in the purpose. It really is advisory committee to the select board for the purpose of recommending allowed use of local and county ARPA funds. It goes further and talks about getting outreach from the community and to look for recommendations on input as it relates to projects that are considered capital today, others that aren't, that should be considered. It mentions here also the notion of through free cash, through planned debt, through other activities, and through potentially asking the state for more ARPA funds, which happened already once for us, and it's happened for a number of other communities. For us, it happened in terms of Lot 5 down at the town forest. But there may be more opportunities to do that. It feels like the state has some funds that they haven't decided how to allocate yet, and well thought out plans may be able to get some more of those funds. So that's what's being considered in terms of what's going on here. There's a deliverable specifically, not later than October 31st, and that's chosen specifically to be ahead of November town meeting. And then this group would sunset in December unless otherwise continued, or there may be another group that comes forward. So that's kind of the thinking that's here.
Anne.
Thank you both for your efforts. I have a couple of questions and comments. Did you say, Karen and or Mark, that you'd worked with town hall staff in developing this?
Oh, I was referring more to the participants of the financial forums. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
Okay, I was just wondering, I note that it says administrative support will be provided by town hall staff, scheduling and posting meetings, taking minutes, etc. Certainly, board members can't on our own actually do the posting, so that makes sense. But I know, just being mindful of administrative staff time. Do we know? I just don't know if we've checked in with town staff to see if that actually is something that could be provided given this current staffing that we have. So that may be worth, I don't know if that's something that Bob could speak to now, or if that's something that you gave any thought to.
Bob?
I'm tempted to say Fidel's problem, but that probably wouldn't
Yes,
be.
that's what I would.
It really depends what night of the week and possibly even what week of the month that this board meets. But if the meetings are recorded either via Zoom or from RCTV, then people can do minutes not by attending, but in the future. So it really depends on the particulars. I certainly can't guarantee that, no matter what you do, there'll be a person there to cover it, because there's not that many people and there's a lot of meetings logistically.
Right. Mark?
And could I follow up too? So I was negligent in not mentioning that after kind of crafting this, we did speak with the chair and vice chair of FinCom to get their feedback. And to make sure that, again, to be thankful for the efforts that they had taken, but also to understand kind of where they were coming from, and if they thought this would be accomplishing a purpose. Again, it's kind of select board focused. I will slightly speak for them, but they're also on the call, so they could certainly add some more information. But we did, especially in the last few days, work with them to try to make sure that we were kind of delivering on this notion of getting this input from the boards, from town staff, and from the public.
Great. And I assume, Mark, given that you were heavily involved in the creation of this language, that the second paragraph of the purpose you find satisfying in terms of taking into account the long-term needs and spending priorities of the community. I know in our last board conversation, that was a strong priority of yours.
Yes, very much. And we didn't want to, I didn't want to boil the ocean in order to think about how to work with the ARPA funds. I think we do need to talk a lot about capital and priorities. And I think that what we kind of started having a couple of meetings a year ago, literally, where we started talking about priorities and needs and things like that. And I think we had a couple of those meetings. And I would encourage us to think, not tonight, but in the future, about how do we do more of that? How do we get those conversations going? How do we make sure they happen and kind of, work all the groups together and figuring that out? And I think that in talking, I see Ed here and I know Jean's on as well. I think that a lot of us, even in that small group, felt that that is really productive and good for the community. And we want to get there. So if you're asking me, hey, you wanted to go big, and now you're going small, is that okay? And I think the answer is yes. I think that this language is specifically meant to say we need to be thinking broadly. My biggest concern was that we'd end up spending the ARPA funds on a couple of things and then look back and have the community say, I'm not sure what you guys were thinking.
So the committee needs to be thinking about these longer term priorities, but they're only charged in terms of a deliverable with recommendations for the ARPA funds.
Correct. But there are a lot of examples where there are different choices that could be made to fund certain things. The water tank being the first one right on the table, right? Those can be paid for by debt. Town meeting has authorized that to take place. Or a decision could be taken to spend some or all of $2 million from ARPA funds.
Okay. And I think it's clear to me that the meetings and deliberations of the committee would be subject to the open meeting law. Is the purpose of putting that in there just to make sure that the public is aware of that? Because I don't think putting it in there would change or do anything in terms of what laws the committee would be subject to. I think they would be subject to all applicable law, including the open meeting law. I know early on in the conversation with FinCom at the financial forum, there was, depending on how this was structured, I suppose if it had been an advisory group to a staff member, then it may not have been if a staff member had asked for advice from members of the public. So just wondering why that language is in there, given that I think it's sort of in a way to me, it seems self-evident. And it also, there are other laws certainly that the committee would also be subject to.
So I think I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
If you don't mind, I was going to say that some other ad hoc, some other communities that are peer communities go ahead and put that right in the charter. It probably is superfluous, and I hear what you're saying. I will also add for the everybody on the call and the community that town council has taken a look at this, particularly on the topic you guys were discussing earlier. How broad can it be?
Okay.
All of these, even though we don't directly allocate free cash, none of that raised any flags that the committee can discuss, have a broad discussion before making those recommendations. Thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you.
What she said.
Cool.
Other questions? Carlo.
Thanks. I guess, Ed, I can see, and I see Jean's screen is still there. Originally, there were 3 FinCom members that volunteered / got appointed to this, correct?
So, Carlo, this is a committee that the select board would create. That would be a committee reporting to the select board.
Right.
So FinCom did create a subcommittee of their own and appoint some members to that subcommittee. So this is a different entity that doesn't exist yet.
Right, I understand that, but they're just trying to get a baseline where it was 3 members, not 2 members.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I appreciate it. Yeah, Carl. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There were 3 members of FinCom, and then it would have been 2. It was really to get to the odd number, and so that was really the genesis of it. And I think us thinking just pretty linearly about the entities that were involved. If we went 3 anywhere else, then you would have you would have had to post. And I think that was what we were, we weren't thinking that. I think using the library, kind of trustees does the same thing, get you to the odd number, and it keeps everything else a little bit more consistent. So.
Okay, yeah, so so I understand that, and thank you for that clarification. So what I would like, what my support would be to keep the 3 members of FinCom, since they volunteered and have a lot of to say about this, and drop the Library Board of Trustees. That would be my recommendation / amendment, whatever you want to call it, to this document. Thanks.
Very good. Other comments? Chris?
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, for me, I just go back 6 months ago when I was in the meeting with you, and Jean had brought the proposal forward for forming the ARPA committee. And I said then that I didn't want to be responsible for $7 million for a parking garage. It should be a townwide thing with the schools and everyone else involved with the money, just to give their input. So then fast forward to the November 4th meeting where FinCom voted to appoint all their members to the newly formed ARPA committee that was going to be going out. I mean, in my opinion, they deserve the spot that the amount of that they've put in only to get shot down at our last meeting just seems very prudent to me. The amount of steps that were taken and all the, I'd like to say, fail safes that were involved, everything just kept progressing the way that it is. I saw no issue with any way FinCom had approached this all the way up until our prior meeting. I was fully on board with the process they were doing. The 7 people sounded right. The 3 from FinCom, I didn't think of the posting thing. I was more along the line that, they had 9 members, so it's a lot more leveraged out that way. Plus the select board has the final decision. So it doesn't matter if they have 60 people. So for me, it's to not have the existing members from all the committees that already put this time and effort in, to then just replace it at the last minute when all of this work was done is absolutely the wrong thing to do. And if we are on this board firm with the Board of Library Trustees getting a spot, then I would recommend that the select board be reduced down to 1 position on the ARPA committee, because overall, we have the final say anyway. So I don't think it's right to remove a member from FinCom that has been here since the formation of the committee that from November 4th. That's my thing. I think it's completely wrong to remove somebody like that. Make it 8 people at this point, whatever you want to do. But I will stick firm on the 3 FinCom members, 2 school committee, 2 select board, and that's where I'm at. All the existing people that were appointed from all those other positions should be getting a spot here today. It's the right thing to do.
Mark?
Thanks, Karen. So just a couple of thoughts here. One, I think it's important that we do this right. There was a discussion of kind of the timeline that's involved with ARPA, which still gives us plenty of time in terms of things. We don't have to have our allocations till the end of 23, and we don't have to spend it till the end of 24. So there's reason to be thinking about it now, but it's not like we're not on fire on this thing right now. So that's kind of piece 1. Piece 2 is, I think that the select board does have say over this. And the point is to be gathering kind of, I guess, the right input. And I know that the original consideration was to have 2, 2, and 2. And I think that that's right in terms of the 3 boards. I hear the discussion about having a 7th person. Given its advisory, I don't think it's a problem to have 6, but understand too that 7 feels better. I think that it's important that the weighting that kind of each of the groups has is pretty similar. And my only hesitation in saying that would be, well, hey, but the Library Board of Trustees as proposed will only get 1 seat. I think that we need to do this the right way. I am uncomfortable giving one group more say, more school, more select board, more more FinCom. I think the balance is what was initially thought about, and I think that's still the right way to do it. So that's why we worked it through this way, to try to offer as much balance as we can. Yes, it is strictly advisory. And yes, it's meant to gather inputs and kind of be less, I guess, imposing of personal wills and more kind of thinking about all the town activities together, which is again why I think the right balance at 7 is set up as each of the main boards that were initially envisioned would have two seats. I have seen it done in other communities where it's not the actual members of the committees that sit on these groups, but rather they're allowed to choose the individuals to serve. So in other words, the select board would select 2 people, school committee would select 2 people, finance committee would select 2 people. That's another way to think about it. But again, I think a lot of the work that the finance committee did here is very helpful to the structure. I think that this is the right way to do it. And again, it is advisory to the select board. So it needs to, that's the structure that I believe makes the most sense here. We're being very open in trying to solicit additional input because nominally we don't have to, and frankly, most communities don't. But I think we're looking for more input, and I think the right way to do it is as suggested here. Thanks.
I think you were recognizing me, Karen.
Yes, I was. Thank you.
Thanks. So I, in the last meeting, had said that I did favor keeping everyone who was previously appointed since they had stepped up and indicated their willingness to serve. I do recall in I think the original FinCom financial forum where this was discussed, recommending that if we were going to do a 7-member committee, that there be representation from the Library Board of Trustees. And I do think that if we don't have that representation, there is an important stakeholder not represented. Chris's idea is somewhat intriguing to me of, keeping everyone who is previously appointed, having one select board member and one library board member. That would get us to 7, include representation from the library board, and recognize the service of everyone who's already previously stepped up. It's a little bit FinCom heavy. They have done a lot of heavy lifting to get us here thus far, as have Karen and Mark in the last couple of weeks. So that's sort of my thought in this moment, which I hadn't previously considered until Chris's suggestion. We just have one board member, and I actually think that would be okay, given that the full board ultimately has the say over the expenditure of all of this money. So thanks.
Okay, so Chris, I'll recognize you again for the second go round, and then if Carla wants to go a second time or a second time, and then I'll speak, and then we need to vote and move on. So Chris, please.
Thanks, Karen. And yeah, and to your point, I'm not opposed to making it an 8-member committee and just having the 2 select board members. I am my firm belief that everyone did what they did before. It got us to the point that we were at, and I think we should stick with the people that we had on all the various things. So I'm open to 8. I don't think there's going to be a disagreement, but where it's 4 forward. I highly doubt that's going to end up happening. So I'm fine with the 8. If not, I'm okay with reducing it to just the 1 select board member. It is what it is. As much as I would love to do it myself, I mean, I'm the right thing to do is to keep the 3 FinCom thing. Everything else at this point is just, we have to get this committee going. The water tower stuff has to be done by September. It can't be October, November, whatever is presented in the description of it. It has to be done now. We can't start meeting in April. We're not going to end up spending the money that we have to. That's my fear. We just have to get these meetings going, and if we can appoint everybody today and then we can have a meeting in February, fantastic. But April, I think is just way too far away. It's got to get going now. So that's what I got. Hopefully like I said, I'm fine with the 8. If not, we go with the 7, but I'm the 3 FinCom members. I am a firm 3 for me. So thank you.
Carlo, any final comments?
Yeah, please, thank you. Could I ask either Ed or Jean, is it the chair and the vice chair, and who would the third person be that was on the committee again?
Ed, please. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Karen. So Carlo, we put it out there. We didn't purposely make it chair and vice chair. It just,
That's fine. That's fine.
yeah, it just so happened that it was, chair, vice chair, and then Mary Ann Downing was the third member.
Thank you. So that's a good point. So to add on to what Mark said as far as input and different voices, not to discount you two, but if Mary Ann is the one that's going to be dropped because of this charge, Mary Ann's one of the smartest people in this town.
Oops, Ed. Thank you, Carlo.
Yeah, and so yeah, I'm pretty smart too. No, I'm just kidding. So my point with that, Carlo, is that for us, we would take it back, and it's not a de facto thing that any one of us. I think we would just, from my perspective, how I would look to approach this after thinking about this is that we would just essentially start from scratch, and it's not, and I think it actually makes it a little bit easier to actually have that discussion with the rest of the committee, because there's a little bit less of Jean and my fingerprints on it, from that perspective. So I think that might, lead to it, maybe quite possibly a different set of people that would be recommended. At least that's how I'd hope it to be.
Okay, so you would revote, basically.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, that's a much quicker way of saying it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Anne, you're on like number 3.
I would also be thinking about it some more. I would be okay with an 8-member board, given I think Mark's point that if you have an even number on an advisory board, the board can't actually, or the advisory committee is not able to allocate and spend this money as it is. So it actually would be somewhat informative to the board. I think if the board receives information from this ad hoc committee that there was a 4-4 vote, that provides some interesting information to the board to ponder. So I'm okay with that makeup as well.
So I just want to make the point, and thank you, that's all good feedback. I just want to make the point that these are, and this was also made in previous meetings about the topic, is that this is an open meeting. All select board members, we can post, all select board members can go, all FinCom members can go, members of the public can go, school committee. In fact, the whole point is this is a committee that will identify needs, prioritize needs, and do work so that the select board gets to do the easy part, which is just agree or not agree with the priorities. So really, this is not really a voting committee. This is a reaching out to the public, reaching out to boards, and identifying needs and considering them in light of other sources of funding and long-term capital needs, and putting together a deliverable, which is a set of recommendations for the full select board. So I would also like to point out my concerns with this, and the original proposal was 2, 2, and 2, because if we have 6 appointed members and we're also inviting up to 4 town staff members to really be active participants, then it starts getting unwieldy once you start saying, well, we're going to have 7 appointed and 8 appointed. Back to the comment or the question to Bob, whether we have the administrative resources to support this, and Mark's comment about the relatively short time frame. I recommend that we stick with a smaller, and that's kind of why this is put together like this. So I guess we could take next steps. We could, if somebody would like to make an amendment to this, we could vote on that, and then we can vote on the whole charge the charge as a whole, and then actually hearing, so, and also let me take a step back. We were very sensitive to, I am very sensitive to the need, to Chris's point, and other people have made the same point, that we don't want to wait too long. We want to get this going, and I don't want the select board to hold this planning, this allocation up any longer. So, but a comment that Ed made, we could hold off on our next agenda item until school committee and finance committee has had a chance to appoint members, if that's a preference of the board. Okay, Carlo? Oops, yeah.
I'll make an amendment to the
Okay.
charge. Motion to amend the charge for the Opera Advisory Committee to 8 members.
Second,
Okay, who seconded it?
I did, Karen.
Chris, thanks. Actually, I don't even have to track this. Wonderful, because Jackie's ought to do this. Awesome. Okay. Motion to amend this charge to 8 members. And Carla, can you be very specific and let me know who the 8 members would be?
Sure, thank you. 3 FinCom members, 2 from the school committee that are already appointed, 2 from the.
Yeah, I'm thinking if we put the actual names in, then things can get moving more quickly.
Thank you.
That we won't have to go back to all of the committees and have them reappoint.
Yep, that makes sense.
I agree with that as well, and you're muted, Karen.
Great. Chris, go ahead and speak.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I agree with Ann and Carlo in the amendment with the 8. We can include the existing members' names that were already done, the 2 select board members that get chosen now, and then the library board of trustees to be determined. So I guess we would only have to vote on the library person if everything shakes out the way it is. Is that the
So
way?
you'll notice in the charge, and again, this was reviewed by town council, the library trustee would be appointed by the board of library trustees, so we don't actually need to take action on that.
Okay, perfect.
They
Okay.
would have to vote, but we wouldn't have to.
Right.
Excellent.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Well, I think we'd want to, I think it would make, well, I guess we could take this vote as is and then move on to
Names.
appoint select board members, or we could do it within this
Okay,
membership.
so let me get back to the agenda. So the agenda is actually, you're right, we're getting a little bit off track. So we have 2 agenda items. One is to create the ARPA Advisory Committee and accept a charge. The second item would be to, we're kind of mixing the discussing of ex officio members. So that would be a separate vote. That was the way the agenda was intended. So as I was understanding the amendment, it was an amendment to the charge that we should vote on. Then we should decide, then we should vote to create the committee as a whole, and then take a separate vote to appoint the members.
That's fine.
Okay,
I do
any
think
other
the
discussion on
name-
the,
Yeah, I think in voting on this, I think we should name the FinCom members and school committee members, so then they do not have to go back to their committees and appoint.
that's the purpose of the additional agenda item.
So then we would have to go back and amend what we've just done.
The charge doesn't list people's names. You see what I'm saying? And this is like the screening committee. We created the screening committee, then we appointed the members, just 2 different steps.
But if we take this vote as is, with the language as is, then we're asking FinCom to appoint, and we're asking the school committee to appoint, and they will have to then go back to their committees and make those appointments in a separate meeting.
Oh, I didn't even see that. You know what? I apologize. I was in a different country. Okay, so yes. No, I was actually, my intention was that the select board would appoint. Okay, I see what happened here. All right. Okay, so are we still gonna vote on the amendment and then just vote on the charge and mix it all together? Yeah, I see the problem.
Jean has her hand raised.
Sure, Jean.
Hi, thank you. I don't know how to unraise my hand, so I'll figure that out in a minute. Just a quick procedural question. The school committee has appointed 2 members to a FinCom subcommittee. So that subcommittee, if you go down this path, will need to be dissolved. And I'm not sure you can just appoint 2 people to I legitimately don't know the answer to this, but there's going to have to be a process of dissolving the existing subcommittee. I don't know that you can just appoint people. And sort of as a related question, I don't know if there's been any outreach to the school committee about this change, because they were consulted about this, and they appointed in December 2 members to a very specific committee under FinCom with a certain makeup. So it might be worthwhile, if it hasn't happened, perhaps it's happened and I just wasn't part of those discussions, but it might be worth reaching out to them and just getting some input.
There's been
But I
some
don't-
outreach as to, after our last select board meeting, there was some outreach to the chair that I did.
Okay.
I think,
Um,
and I
so-
think we probably can't. I think we can appoint people the way we appointed people to the town manager ad hoc screening committee. We were able to name people, and we were able to name people ex officio. I do think that like Karen said that, and like you said, that outreach to them to make sure that that's all good is makes sense, certainly. But I think in terms of what we can do, I think we can do that.
We can.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. So okay, then, so should we further amend this charge then, that we're gonna go ahead and appoint finance committee members and school committee members tonight? To fill those positions, the select board is gonna appoint, select board's creating an ad hoc committee, and
I think we
like to go ahead
name
and
them.
appoint those people?
I think we name them and we delete where it says appointed by the finance committee and
Yes.
appointed by the school
Yes.
committee.
Yeah.
We leave in place where it says appointed by the board of library trustees.
Yes, and that was an oversight on my part. I did not see that.
So I think we could say finance, we don't even write 3. We could just write finance committee members, Marianne Downing, Jean Borowski, and Ed Ross. School committee member, but I do think we want to say ex officio, because that's the capacity in which they would be serving.
That's correct.
To serve ex officio. And then we could say school committee members. It's Tom Wise and Sean Brandt, correct? To serve ex officio. And then we want to take out appointed by the school committee. Yep. Do we want to hear, I mean, we certainly could in a separate vote appoint our select board members, but do we want to just do it all at once?
So I don't know I have to say that I'm really not in favor of this change of the committee. I'm gonna refer back to Mark's comments. We thought long and hard about waiting, going back to the original idea that was discussed at the financial forum. And so, that is, I'm really not in favor of expanding it to 8. Oh, sorry, and I can't see everybody's hand. Chris.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I'm fine with how it's presented on screen right now with the 8.
Other board members?
I'm fine.
Mark?
So I think we're going to need to vote first the amendment and then second membership. Right?
Yeah.
We're gonna do those two pieces.
Yep.
Sorry, Mark, what do you, can you repeat that?
So where you had suggested perhaps we could just decide who the select board members we'd want to put in here. I think that's a second step, if you will, because there seems to not be agreement yet on what's on the screen.
Yeah, this is my amendment, correct, Mark? Yeah, this is my amendment to change the charge.
So I think that we vote on this first.
Yep.
And then we come back and we take a
Yeah,
second.
you don't
vote.
put people's names in the charge. I mean, this could be, again, a draft document. A charge is what the committee is going to be doing. Appointing the members is a separate step. But for clarification purposes, this is fine.
I mean, do we want, how soon, Ed and Jean, how soon is FinCom meeting again? If we want to do it like this, for everyone, sort of if people think it's cleaner to name, say 3, and then you'd go back and appoint, how soon is FinCom meeting again?
Karen, can I respond?
Oh, yes, you may. Thank you, Ed. Sorry.
No worries. Thanks, Karen. We have a meeting scheduled for the 16th of February.
Okay, so that's about 2 weeks from now.
Yes.
And the school committee meets about every 2 weeks. I had really wanted to get things going. If we think it's cleaner to have, to Karen's point, to have the separate votes, and especially given that this was already, this structurally was approved by town council, it sounds like we'd be able to get this off the ground in the next couple of weeks. The Board of Library Trustees will still have to meet anyway. We could just change the, change the numbers, but not do the names, and allow the committees to make their own appointments, even though it would be somewhat of double work for them, or them repeating work they'd already done. But from a procedural standpoint, it is a little cleaner. I was trying to get this done, quickly so it can get off the ground and then running, but it is a little cleaner, I think.
FinCom's meeting is after our meeting, our next meeting.
Mm-hmm. The 16th, yeah.
Chris.
Thanks, Karen. I'm fine with keeping the names here, only because, like I said, we're under a time constraint where we do have to get this running. If the members that are listed on here don't want to do it, they can just withdraw after the fact. In my opinion, I don't think they are going to. We have at least 2 people on here right now that would say if they're going to do it or not, the way that it's written. I don't think we should be wasting any more time on this, and just have the members, how it's listed, the Board of Library Trustees, whenever they meet next, that's kind of what's going to have to govern this. Because if they don't have a meeting for another month, then we're waiting for a month. Like, I don't know how long it's going to be, but at least we can get everything else done just by doing this how it is written right now. So I didn't see any reason to just change it. Just have it be the way it is, and let's just, start having the discussions and get this going.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chris. I'm gonna ask again. We need to take these names off this, that they do not belong in the charge. That's it. This is a structural document. This is purpose. You don't put the names of the members in here. We didn't do it in the town screening. I'm sure we haven't done it on any other ad hoc committee we've created. This is just a charge. That's just step one. We just need to take the names out of here. And then I'd like to, as Mark said, vote on the proposed amendment to have 8 members and identified with just that change. So whose screen are we looking at? Bob's. Bob, could you do me a favor? Could you just copy and paste the names maybe to the bottom of the sheet or something, just to make this cleaner? The agenda item was vote on the discuss and vote on the charge, and then vote to appoint members. So
With all due respect, my understanding is that's an amendment on the floor, though.
so
The
how
first
many
amendment was
do
the
we have
8
now?
members, and the second was to include names. So it's up to the board to decide.
Okay, all right, that's fine. We can vote on this.
I
is not what
could go.
charge-
I could kind of go either way on the names. I'd been thinking like, let's just get this all done. I do agree it's cleaner to have it as a separate vote. I especially given that town council hasn't looked at it with the names.
So these are ex officio members. They are appointed only as long as they serve in their capacities. I think that is one of the reasons that that's there. So if a member swaps out for whatever reason, that means we have to go back and change the charge. And you're right, we don't have everyone on the phone to confirm all this, but we've looked at a number of charges and
Yeah.
we've created a bunch of ad hoc committees, and that's just not how we do it. Could I, and if we need to, because amendment was made on the floor, I would be happy to make another amendment that we remove the names. Jean, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I don't know the legal aspect of this, but I can say from personal experience that there are times when people just aren't able to do things extra on committees for a variety of personal reasons. And I don't think you'd want to be locked into, if somebody weren't able to do this, that representation wouldn't be there. So for what it's worth, and a little overstepping, obviously it's the select board's decision, but it would be nice if somebody was unable to serve, if someone else could just slide in and replace them, as opposed to, like you said, a whole new, like, stop the committee, revote and everything. So that's just my 2 cents.
So I'd like to make an amendment that we remove the committee member names from the previous strike, or if that's part of the previous amendment, then I would like to make an amendment to an amendment. A friendly amendment, hopefully, to just remove the specific names from the charge.
My amendment was only the number and the allocation. So I think we have to vote on that first, like Mark said. I didn't talk about the names in my amendment. It was just,
Okay, I had suggested the names. I'm happy to withdraw the names, so we can just vote on the number.
I am fine with that.
Thank you.
Would it be easier just to go back to the original document if you have it, and then just make it 8?
Having too much fun, Mark.
Oh, don't want to get in the way, sorry.
it's keeping them awake.
Oops. So now, do you want me to leave the 3 because you're modifying it to 8?
Yes, please.
Okay, all set.
Someone second. Do you have to second my amendment? Did anyone?
I wrote down that Chris seconded it. Yes, and I'm sure Jackie got that too. It was a long time ago, but yep. Okay. Okay. Any further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? Okay. On the proposed changes noted on the screen before you, as I see you, Chris,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Karen, no. Okay, so that the structure's changed. So now we can vote on the main motion. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like I'm sounding like Alan. So, Mark, do you have a motion for the charge itself? Or
Yes.
actually, you already made it. Did you already make it? You made the
I
motion.
don't think so.
you made
I
the
don't think I
amendment.
did, actually.
No, he did it.
Okay, so move to
All right.
create a Reading ARPA Advisory Committee as presented in the committee charge documents circulated and amended at tonight's meeting.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Yes. Could
Yes.
we, I'm just in the administrative support will be provided by town hall staff, to the, maybe just say to the extent available or something like that.
So
Mark?
I have a question. I'm not sure what the alternative is. In other
The
words,
alternative is, and I've done this in a meeting before, as has Karen, is that members of the committee take notes.
so I would speak against that. I think that what Bob had suggested makes more sense, which is that it's going to be recorded, and then there doesn't have to be someone physically at the meeting, but to find a way to take care of it afterward and have a third party do it, I think is going to be more efficient.
Do we want to say meetings will be recorded and administrative support will be provided by town hall staff?
That's fine. Yeah.
That works.
I'm good with that.
It's not fun to take notes. I'm just thinking if you know there wasn't staff available, what would to allow the committee to keep proceeding. So, but I like this. This is great. Yeah, I think we probably want to retain Bob's scheduling and posting meetings, taking minutes, etc. Thanks.
Karen, Chris has his hand up.
Thanks, Karen. The only thing that I would recommend changing on this is down on the date where it says October 31st. So how we have to provide the recommendations no later than October 31st. I think it has to be September 20th. Isn't that when the water tower stuff has to be done by? Correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, or whatever date that has to be. Is it September 20th?
15th is what Sharon said.
September 15th. So I'd like to see about having that changed to September 15th.
For that specific item or for the whole?
No, just for that they have to submit where Bob is typing it now. It said October 31st, but it can't be that late because the water tower is going to be done by September 15th.
Well, could we write some things that would provide some flexibility for the committee to provide earlier recommendations, but they can still provide I mean, does the board want everything at once? Or can we, you know, for example, we had the vote tonight about COVID test kits, if this committee had been set up, would it have been okay if they provided an interim recommendation to us tonight? We do want to provide them with the ability to do that going forward.
Yeah, I don't want to cut a month and a half off from the total
Yeah.
length.
And Karen, if I could, just a comment on that also. I think that this was not set up so that the board can't spend a penny without feedback from this group. And I think that's an important element here. So there'll be times when they can provide feedback and we want them to provide feedback. And certainly the water tank is a really good example of that one. There are others that don't, where I don't think we need to ask for it. So I most certainly wouldn't say, well, no, we shouldn't be voting on this thing because this group hasn't looked at it. I don't think that's their purpose at all. I think it really is to say, as we're looking at these kind of bigger things, bigger priorities, you know, how does this input help us to understand them and kind of lay things out?
I hear you. So I don't mind withdrawing that, only on the notion that at least the select board will deal with the water tower thing before this September, like on our own, whatever has to get done. I don't know if I have to point that out here. It's just more when I see October 31st and knowing that, you know, we can take care of the water tower ourselves. It's just something has to be done with it. So I can withdraw that, and just as long as we, you know, keep this on a future agenda. So I'm good. Thanks, Mark.
Can we go back to that, Karen? Karen, I just have a suggestion.
Mhm.
Or Bob rather, could you scroll back down? Why don't we just remove a list of, so that way, if, you know, the committee can operate to provide recommendations when it sees fit, but not later than October 31st. So it doesn't have to come in one list.
On the first page, were we going to have the select board appoint these folks, or are we leaving it? It's back. We went back to the original version. So it says school committee. We'll wait for school committee to appoint to and wait for FinCom to appoint their members, or are we still removing those components so that we can go ahead and appoint people this evening?
We're planning to appoint select board members this evening, but not the other members who will be appointed by their own boards at subsequent meetings.
Okay, so because I heard a lot of need for speed, and that is going to push back several weeks into next month. So I just wanted to be very clear. I thought, yeah,
it will. Yeah, I was sort of going back and forth because I was feeling the need for speed, but then was won over by the argument for the need for sort of cleanliness in structure.
Okay. I can't see that. Could we, Bob, could you scroll down to the top again? Thank you. So these are additional amendments that we need to vote on then.
I think this may be just one amendment to the original motion. These are the changes proposed.
So we already voted on the first two. So there's that page meetings will be recorded, and then down below there's that other. So that's two.
I think there's a typo up at the top. The RCPA Advisory Committee. Is that correct?
No, that's a typo. Right. So I think it should be RAAC. Thanks, Chris. Yep.
Thanks, Bob, for keeping up with all these edits.
And take this as one vote, Karen. How do you want to do that?
Can you read your motion again, Mark?
Move to create a Reading ARPA Advisory Committee. We probably should use this acronym, shouldn't we? So sorry, can you go the RAAC, sorry, the Reading ARPA Advisory Committee, RAAC, as amended in the committee charge documents circulated at tonight's meeting. That's the way it originally read. That feels a bit awkward.
It reads as amended already, like what you originally read said as amended.
No.
So if I could offer a friendly amendment to add as amended to the conclusion of what you read, and then I think that would incorporate the other changes.
Please.
That's a friendly amendment. We can
Accepted.
accept. Very good.
Yes.
Okay, so can we just do a motion to accept the charges laid out on the screen and amended? Is that sufficient for a vote?
I think that's what Mark has done now.
Okay.
So we need a
Okay, any
second.
further discussion then?
I think I did a second earlier before we
Okay.
got off on a tangent.
Thanks.
Okay, no discussion appearing as I see you members. Mark,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes,
Karen, yes. Okay, next item was appoint ex officio and staff members to the Adhoc ARPA Advisory Committee. So the staff members we've invited to participate, we're not really appointing them. But we could talk about who would like to be working with this group from the select board. Okay, Mark's raising his hand, Chris is raising his hand. All right, that sounds good. I'm comfortable with nominating the two of those folks. So do we want to hear folks explain about why they'd like to be on the committee and their qualifications? Would that be helpful? Okay, Mark wants to go first. Awesome.
I'm a 3-year member of the select board. So obviously I'm very interested in kind of how we're thinking about capital, how we're using our funds, figuring out how to make sure we're taking care of community priorities. I think I have a lot of background from having been involved in the town for a long time, particularly having spent a lot of time on FinCom as well. And I'd like to bring that forward here.
Great, thank you. Chris?
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I think I'd be able to bring a lot of brand new and fresh ideas. I discussed some stuff earlier today with Bob that, you know, he laughed at some, but some he did not laugh at. So yeah, I'm more of the mind where we have 7.5 million. I want to turn it into 8. I want to turn it into 9, where the funds can be utilized in the future with, I didn't know until tonight, obviously, that the ARPA money now can get used for anything. I was more of investing it in, I guess I'll just give out my ideas now, is just spending some money on solar at the schools and whatnot, where we'd be able to use the funds from that to offset the electrical budgets that they have. So this way here, it would free up stuff for higher teacher pay or full day kindergarten, et cetera. It's not going to eliminate it, but you know, it's baby steps towards, you know, bettering the environment, making us more reliant on electrical. The kids can learn. It can be a whole class at school about this stuff if it does go to high school, whatever. Just I think I'll bring a lot of fresh ideas and in a different perspective to it, and I would definitely look forward to being there with Mark.
Okay, thank you. I love solar. All right. If there are no other folks at this point that are dying to serve in this committee, why don't we Could we have a motion, Mark, to appoint yourself and Chris to be the select board reps on this Writing ARPA Advisory Committee?
Move to appoint Chris Haley and Mark Doxer as the select board ex officio members to the, sorry, RAAC. Did I get it right?
Yeah. Rack. Okay.
We're gonna need a different intonation on that. Okay.
Second,
Like Aflac. Okay, any discussion? None appearing. Are we ready for a vote? Members, as I see you, Mark,
Yes.
Carlo,
yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
and Karen. Yes. Terrific. Okay. Next. All right, we've already done 9 o'clock item. Wonderful. So then we have in the agenda, a couple of select board members requested information on recent land purchases. And so Bob provided a lot of information on previous select board discussions and sort of geological information about the Oakland parcel. So Bob, I don't know if you have anything else you want to share with the select board, or we can open up to board questions.
No, what I reproduced was a prior subcommittee of the board's work. And if the board as a whole would get together and ask for what they want, unfortunately, I had different members asking for different things. So I just produced, what had been done in the past. But if, probably not me, probably for Fidel in the future, if you just discuss it at a meeting and ask for something, that's a little easier than different members asking for different things. Especially when some of the things are in conflict with each other. So Fidel and I talked about this briefly today, and it's been discussed all the way back to John and Vanessa. There's different ways to approach this, but the way that was being used a couple of years ago was first to determine what needs might the town have for land. And that doesn't mean it's a definitive statement, but what are the possible needs for land? Because the amount of land and the type of land that the town owns is very, very widespread. So if, you're only going to look at big parcels to put a building on, that's, very definitive. If you're looking to put a cell tower somewhere, that could be a very small parcel. So really, the first question to ask yourself is, why are you interested in town land? What are you thinking of doing with it? And that can narrow the selection of what type of land we look at. When Vanessa and John started, they wanted to look at all town land. So you see, a nauseating inventory that's not very sensible of everything. But if you want to narrow that scope and say, okay, now I just want to look at A, B, or C, then obviously the information can be greatly narrowed for you. The most obvious parcels are Oakland Road and Simon's Way right now. Those are buildable. Those are, on the large scale. So it really depends on the purpose. If you're just thinking of things like community center, senior center, DPW garage, something large scale, then that's a pretty easy discussion because there's not a lot of town land that's going to fit. But if it's something else, then it can be a deeper dive. And then it's possible also that you may want to get into who owns the land. Is it conservation? Is it select board? Is it school committee?
Yeah.
In the
Bob, can I
past.
interrupt you for a second? I think Mark had a question. Sorry. Mark, did you have a question? Are we swatting flies? Sorry.
No, it's a question. I think, Bobby, you were, I think, driving where I am hoping it heads. What are the buildable large plots? And then talk a little bit more about what are the potential activities that we might want to do there. So for example, I'm not concerned with cell towers. You mentioned, senior center, DPW garage, RMLD, potential relocation. I had a discussion with some residents about the idea of veterans housing. Those are all going to take good sized plots of land, buildable areas, not conservation. And I think you're right. I think Oakland Road and Simon's Way are the first two most likely candidates, and wanted to see if there are some others and what kind of sizes are involved. And then talk with those constituencies about what their needs are. So the RMLD one is a little bit different in some ways, but if there were another town space available that could make sense, that might open up the opportunity to do some stuff in the current place that RMLD is now. which would be great. And you know, we had some visions for what that could be. I think that's awesome. The recalc will, not for April, but probably for November, be able to come back with thoughts on senior needs, senior community needs, on more of a spatial basis, perhaps, than they will in April. So that would give us, you know, some feel for something like that. I'm sorry, I'm like a dog with a bone on these state ARPA funds, and I don't know why, but until they're gone, I'm going to be.
You know why? Because we just went to the MMA meetings where Senator Warren said, we have money. We have money for water and sewer projects. Come and get it.
I think that's what we need to do. I really do. I think we need to put together some proposals and work with our state delegation and go for it and see what they'd be willing to fund or partially fund. And that feeds back into the system of what we might do with some of these spots. I can tell you that from the Council on Aging discussions, you know, the big frustration for them has been kind of number one, getting a voice at the table, if you will, but also thinking about, gee, is there a place we could go? And I think this discussion we're having now may be able to address that in one way in terms of buildable lots. There are other ways that are going to come up from that too that might not require, you know, a new lot. Maybe there's existing space, maybe it's even rental, who knows. But to me, that's what I was hoping to kind of get from this, and maybe even think about, okay, on Oakland Road, what's the buildable square feet without having to corner the market on dynamite to get there. You know, I know the borings are there and that was interesting, but I thought there was something, maybe it came from the committee that was working on the early childhood center, that they kind of had a footprint and they said, this is probably where you, without crazy effort.
For land is, that kind of determines what you look for.
Right.
So just don't omit that fact, because there are private landowners in this town that do have an open mind, some, in terms of disposing the land or trading the land.
Yeah, and sorry, I may have not stated clearly enough on the senior center that I think that might be an interesting kind of opportunity that way. It may be that there are existing activities that could be really appropriate, and maybe there's a different arrangement that could be made. So I support exactly what you're saying. Thank you.
Board members, other questions? Okay, Chris.
Thanks, Aaron. I think definitely we have to start getting the ball rolling. If there's other previous boards and whatnot that have discussed this and still we haven't done anything with any of the land, we got to come up with some plan or some pathway forward to just do something. So I don't know if we have to form a committee or just have board members go out on their own, or whatever you guys are comfortable with. Just, we have to come back with something like, you know, Carlo's going to mention the Zani property 100 times, so I don't have to beat that with the dead horse. But my only other thing other than Reading Disney World would be like a rec center or something like that. Just something that we'd end up being able to recoup our investment on. You know what I mean? It's just, yes, Reading residents would be free, etc. It's just, we just have to do something though. So whatever we have to do, I don't care if I have to start some committee, do it myself, whatever. We just have to do something so the next board around isn't going over our, you know, recommendations. So I'm good with whatever we can do.
Thank you. Carlo, do you have additional questions?
Thanks. I was going to mention the Zani property, but I guess I don't have to. That was kind of my goal, you know, for the past year, and I know COVID took over, and I have no problem diving into Oakland. That seems a much bigger, higher price tag, but you know, things can be done there. But Bob, can you do we know yet definitively what's delineated at Zani property yet, buildable, and what we can put, you know, do recreation activities on, or parking? I mean, do we know that yet?
I'll answer it backwards. I know the final step of recording deeds has not happened. I do believe the rest of the work has been done, but I know that town council has not gone down to Cambridge to record deeds. So, you know, the idea would be, in theory, you record a deed for a parcel, a lot that's buildable, and another one for a parcel that's wet. And, you know, the select board probably gives the wet one to Conscom. So that step has definitely not happened. I think the wetlands have been delineated. I think that step is possible.
Okay. Yeah, that list was, A, I'm not a geologist, and B, that list was, you know, pages and pages long of what we own. So my interest always has been primarily the Zani property because it's flat. It's a great area. It's right off the highway. It can be private-public partnership. It can be a lot of different uses. We know we can build on it. We just don't know what size building and how much parking, and can we have field space and whatnot. And, you know, Oakland, I see that as more of town use. You know, to redevelop. I know General Way, Walker's Brook 2 is a futuristic idea, but what Mark just brought to mind was, yeah, if we could move RMLD, which is prime real estate, to somewhere more secluded, because it doesn't need to have frontage, it doesn't need to have great access. I know many DPWs and public utilities are just, you know, tucked away. You can get to them with the road that's plowed, but that's a great idea to swap things out or move people. But yeah, the two big parcels are my main concern right now, and that's what they have been.
Bob?
For Oakland Road, it took almost 100 years, but the school committee did do some extensive work. The geotech you saw, town meeting got involved 2 different times and changed some of the paper streets, and the ownership of the land traded back and forth, if you will, between the school committee and the select board. So that's kind of all set. If this board wants us to start doing that kind of work and get the ball rolling on the Zani property, it's not nearly as complicated as Oakland Road was. We can definitely do that, because then you'll have a much better idea of what you have and then what you can do with it. So I'm happy to start that process, and Fidel will finish it.
Bob, may I ask a follow-up? So I'm unclear is if the recount committee comes back and says, oh my gosh, we know what we want to build and it would fit on the Oakland property, could they go ahead and do it? What is standing between, for example, and you ask the same question for the Zani property, but I'm really interested in knowing so I think I heard you say the select board has some authority over the Oakland property now, but what I don't really understand is how entangled it still is, how buildable it is.
Well, as Mark pointed out, Superintendent Doherty had proposed an early education center.
Yep, I remember
In
that.
a couple of different locations, and one was next to the Performing Arts Center and move the parking across the street. The other was to build across the street. So there's work already done. The gating item, you know, on all of this is not legality, it's money. Presumably, you're going to have to ask taxpayers to do things, unless you have, you know, some other funds like ARPA. That's historically been the gating item is, okay, we have to ask for money. So we have to go through a process and so on and so forth. But my understanding is on land the board owns, the board has every right to either sell it or to build on it.
So Bob, could we sell Oakland tomorrow, or do we still have legal work we need to do to clean it up?
You could sell it. There's legal work involved in selling it, but the parcel as such could be offered for sale.
So it's a single entity, and we're not arguing with neighbors about boundaries or anything anymore. All of that's been cleared up?
Yeah, I don't remember if it's a single lot, but it is definitely a well delineated lot, well understood lot. And all the, you know, confusing paper streets were cleaned up and the ownership was cleaned up. So yes, it's clean, it can be sold.
Great. Okay. Thank you. All right, board members, any other questions? All right. Next. Are we doing an update on lot 5? Is that what's next, Mr. Doxer?
I saw Chris had his hand up. I thought.
Oh,
Sorry.
did you? I'm sorry, Chris, go for it. It's off to the side there. I didn't see it.
No worries. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, so I guess we're all in agreement for Bob to get the ball rolling on that, and then Fidel's going to finish it kind of scenario. Is that
Somewhat. Yeah, meaning like everything. Okay.
Yes.
Good suggestion.
Whatever to move this on, so you know future people aren't dealing with it. So yes.
We can make another future agenda item to bring this up again, without either forming a committee yet or just get more information. I mean, because it's been a while since we bought the Zani property, in a couple of years at least, and now we're just getting to the point where, okay, we have this many acres of dry, this many acres of wet, and this many acres of maybe we can put fields on or parking. So until we know that, we don't know how many square feet, how many stories. So that's a big component that we need to know.
So I thought we already did that work. I thought the conservation administrator was just like he looked at the Camp Curtis Guild property and came back and told us there was about an acre there. I thought this work was done for the Zarni property. Am I misunderstanding, Bob? We just need to dust it off?
I think all the preliminary work is done. I'm not 100% sure about that. What I do know is that the final work down at the registry has not been done with deeds.
Oh, okay.
And that's a town council question. I'm not certain. I think it's all in the name of the select board. And so town council is probably going to want to come back to you and talk to you about, do you want to send this parcel to conservation? And, if you put it in conservation's name, then it's permanent, more or less.
All right. So future.
So I'm sure town council would want to talk to you before running down to Cambridge.
Yep.
But I believe a lot of that work has been done.
Okay.
I know Chuck has walked the property. I'm just not sure if legally it's 100% finished. It may be. Anika may know.
Okay. So I think, Carla, you're right. We're probably going to just need to put the Zani property back on the agenda and have specific questions around it. And maybe get everyone involved this time. We didn't have her involved before. Okay, so I made a note, even though we're not quite on that agenda item yet. All right. Okay. Next.
Ready for the Lot 5 update?
Yes, please.
All right, thanks for joining.
9 o'clock, right?
Well, so board members, can you see my screen in the background here?
Sorry, 9:20. Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so let me give you an update. Well, we're kind of having this in the background. So the update is, per board guidance, I met with the chairs of Conservation, Town Forest, and Trails Committee, and the Conservation Administrator, who had all discussed their thoughts at some of their respective meetings. And what was great is there's really a consensus on the best approach and needs for access. The goal, the ideal scenario would be to get a trail easement that's about 10 feet wide on the edge of the Meadowbrook property. And I'm going to kind of show you, are you guys seeing my cursor? Great. Okay. So starting kind of with this red zone, and then this is the existing path that goes right into the town forest. And here is the boundary. So anything kind of inside of the blue is Meadowbrook property. And so here, thinking on it, it's an existing well-used trail already being used by many. The one concern on it is there's an area of erosion that's taking place kind of right at that back edge of Lot 5 where you see in red right now. And if you go outside of Lot 5, you can see there's kind of an existing path where people go over the river literally and through the woods to the town forest we go. And the much preferred access is from the back of Lot 5 directly in that way. It would be for open space and passive recreation, not paved. Could conceivably stay as is, or at some point perhaps wood chips or gravel to go over that. The area over the gas line, which is over here, would not be touched. So with the trail in that one defined area, we could encourage all people using this area to enter there and not in other locations that they might be using now because there's no really good access to get in. So all the committees love the idea of having signage encouraging people to go in here, and also signage elsewhere discouraging people from going there, so that it really becomes the way that folks would go in. The length that you're seeing here inside the Meadowbrook property is roughly 520 linear feet. We looked at some different ideas in terms of, is there a way to access the town forest from our own land, like literally staying over here and off the property? And the issue is that it's a 100-foot wide, always year-round pond. So access would not be at all simple, like really hard to do. The key changes that would be proposed, according to these discussions, is to create kind of a natural staircase where that red area is. Natural staircase could be things like railroad ties, that kind of thing, although it's not at all designed. But the consensus of the group is this would be an excellent sort of Eagle Scout project in terms of what might be desired in terms of what to do. And this, doing it that way, takes care of the erosion, makes it more accessible, and kind of, it's a win, for all things on there. The stairs themselves, that red area, I'm guesstimating 40 to 50 linear feet in terms of kind of what's going on. Please don't hold me to that. But the best design has not been discussed or determined at this point. That's just kind of an estimation of what it would take. The other issue is that the current path there right now, as trampled on, or whatever we want to call it, is probably around 3 feet or so wide currently. And the desire would be, if possible, to get it 10 feet wide, just giving lots more opportunity and access for people to get in there and to use it. Key benefits. This would be a great opportunity for the town to have access here that utilizes an existing well-used trail and make it more accessible for people and safe and off the road. I mentioned the Eagle Scout project. Clearly, we talked to engineering and DPW. I talked about coordinating access. So this would give a long-term clear use for kind of that land in that area. So I think that's a win for everybody. I think Meadowbrook has shared with us that their desire is to kind of know what the plans are for the future. And I think this would be a great way to kind of take care of it. Safety, obviously, from what we've talked about, getting people off the road, and the signage to get people to kind of use this as a real resource. There are kind of 5 steps that would follow from here. I'm going to ask that we take action only on step number 1, but I'll outline kind of what the steps would look like. I think step 1 is that the board would designate someone to work with town council and perhaps a member of staff to join in as well on this, to speak with Meadowbrook, discuss this plan, and request an easement to allow this to happen. So that's kind of the request for tonight. The follow-up from that would be to come back to the board with results of those discussions. If you remember, we didn't move earlier on this because we wanted all the closings to take place first, which all really happened at the very end of December. And the step that would follow after that probably is we'll probably need to do a survey in order to get a written agreement set up. So we would work with town engineering on that. Following that, the select board would want to develop a plan for use of lot 5 itself in terms of what we're talking about there. Perhaps volunteers could work on that with the town, then a public hearing before kind of final recommendations in terms of what's going to happen. Remember, as far as lot 5 is concerned, we've got the $150,000 grant that we believe that we're going to be able to use to help support our activities there. 4th item is we did have a discussion about handicap accessibility. And I think we will want and need to do it. If we do any parking at lot 5, we're going to need to have at least the handicap parking spots as part of the development plan. But that area and that setup is not going to lend itself to kind of a good amount of space that would have accessibility, not easily or not inexpensively. Quite the opposite, hard and very expensive. So the group actually had some really interesting thoughts on creating an accessible area and a bit more of almost a trail or a larger area to work from up at the wood end entrance to the town forest. And that could be a real opportunity area to consider. I appreciate it's a separate project, but the discussion was talking about how to make an accessible area. It could be picnic tables, could be a little bit of an area to actually travel down as well. And again, back to the dog with the bone, maybe we could apply for some ARPA funds to support activities on that. So those are kind of the 5 things. The one thing that I would suggest is, number 1, get your feedback and comments, but then the next step I think would be to sit down with the folks at Meadowbrook and start a discussion and see what we might be able to work out with them. So let me stop and I'll take that off the screen. Any questions or comments?
Chris.
Thanks, Karen. And thanks, Mark, for doing that. Yeah, I do agree that the first step has to be to consult Meadowbrook, because all of this might be moot at this point, or it might not be. So I think whatever we have to do to get the ball rolling on that definitely has to happen, because if they don't agree to it, or, you know, they want to delay it months, whatever has to happen, you know. But yes, I'm good with moving forward with reaching out to them and seeing what has to get done. So definitely everything else, you know, is going to come up at a future meeting, et cetera. It all hinges on whatever they say, and that's that. So whatever we can do.
Other board members, Carlo?
I just want to echo what Chris said, and I want to thank Mark for all the work he's been putting in. I know that, you know, we all are liaisons to boards and committees, but this is different. And I just wanted to thank Mark for doing all this work.
Okay. Anne?
Just echo those thanks to Mark. Clearly, just so much work you've put into this.
Sure, I would echo what my colleague said. Mark, thanks for not annoying the Meadowbrook people and keeping this moving forward. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I'm really, every time you come back to the board, it's all positive, and so good job. And so if you need help, let us know.
So two things, if I could. One, Anika is here. I'm wondering, Anika, did I goof anything up too badly? Did I do okay?
Not at all. Not at all. I thought you did a great job summarizing all the 5 points. There was a ton of discussion. It was kind of a free-form discussion, really trying to crack open like any optimal opportunity to create additional access and additional path, and try to anticipate considerations from a variety of populations, including Meadowbrook. So yeah, no, I'm going to chime in with all the rest of the board members and say thank you, Mark. Yeah.
So would it be okay with the board to take the next step, which is to initiate discussions with Meadowbrook and get their perspective on what we're thinking about here?
Yes, I would be comfortable with that. I see thumbs. Okay. Yep, Mark, I think you have our support. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
All right. Okay, now we're on to the next fun topic. We're going to discuss overnight parking ban. There was an excellent write-up from PTTF in the packet. Thank you very much. And Jean is with us here as well, I'm presuming, for this. Thank you.
I see the deputy chief is here as well, presumably.
Oh, that's right. She's been on for a while. Welcome. And thank you, Anika. I think we already lost her. Okay.
Do you want me to say a few words?
Yeah, yes.
I think the memo pretty much speaks for itself, but the idea is it's very unusual. Reading is one of the very few towns that owns a significant amount of the parking at a train station. So we do have more flexibility than most communities. For instance, just go down the road in Wakefield and the T owns all that parking other than on-street parking. So the idea that PTTF developed was to use a portion of the town-owned parking for overnight parking during the winter for the downtown residents in lieu of just allowing them to park anywhere downtown, which would certainly impede snow operations. And you know, this is the timing certainly is of the essence if you're thinking of this winter. So if you are interested in exploring this, you know, by the end of the night, if you would let us know that so that we can advertise a public hearing for your next meeting to get this, because this ball either needs to start rolling or wait till next winter.
Mark?
great that it's smart enough to tell me, I think you're speaking, but no one's hearing you. Thank you. I think this is a really creative solution to test out and see if it helps mitigate, some of the impact. I know it's going to be asking these folks to get up early and move their cars, but that's what we need. Is we need that area to be cleaned out so that the town can go on with its operations. But I think it provides an opportunity for, is it 35 spots roughly? I think it's a really creative thing to try. I'm in favor.
Anne?
I think this is worth trying, but to back up, why, I'd just be curious from the PTTF, why the overnight parking ban is important, or if it's important, if there is no snow. Does the overnight parking ban only become important for having clear streets, or for any other reason when there's a snow emergency?
I'll start off, and then Christine, you can jump in. When for a year ago, in the first so to speak winter of the pandemic, the police relaxed the ban,
Right.
and when they did impose it for snow emergencies, people just didn't move their cars. So it failed in that sense. And then Christine can speak to non-snow difficulties, if any.
Right, exactly what Bob said. On most of the residential streets, it was a we had to do a lot more towing and moving of cars, or finding homeowners last year when we gave when we didn't impose the parking ban full time. That's most residential streets. The parking lots downtown that we have is really hard to have overnight parking because vehicles do not leave by 6 a.m. We've seen in the past, which is why we came to the board a couple of years ago, because we're selling like employee passes and customers in the day, and the residents that are parking in these lots are not leaving in the morning. So that's just the only part with the problem of downtown parking overnight. And then again, residential, just people weren't moving it as much, because we were really using mostly social media and stuff to get the word out that tonight's going to be a snow ban.
I was wondering what you're seeing from an enforcement perspective, or just a reality on the streets perspective, with the ban in place now. Are people parking overnight, and you're having to engage in enforcement? Are people parking overnight, but it's significantly diminished from last winter?
So this year is totally different because the downtown is so built up, and really a large focus, unfortunately, is the downtown.
Yeah.
Since we've put the parking ban in place, even just in 1 month, we've written 145 overnight parking tickets. So people are just not moving their cars. And I think that's why we're proposing this lot, where we don't need to worry about it so much. But overnight downtown, I don't know if you've seen it, it's just a completely different world now with all these buildings down there. In the summertime, it's packed with cars all night on the side streets, which is, very different than a few years ago.
How does 145 compare to a previous year when there was the ban in place?
So on an average, without all these downtown new residents, we would probably write 20 tickets the first month, and then it would dwindle down to 1 or 2 a night.
So right now there is a ban in place,
Mm-hmm.
but people are still parking. So there still presumably is an issue on the days when there are snow emergencies. And Chris, I know Chris spoke at our last meeting about what he heard at the park committee, and Karen, if you'll give me leave to ask Chris a question, I just was hoping he could speak to what he heard from residents at the park committee about the overnight parking ban.
Am I good, Karen?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Ann. Yeah, so we had a bunch of residents, like I said, showed up to the meeting because obviously the overnight parking ban just went into effect, and then everyone showed up to the meeting. And one person was speaking on behalf of like almost the entire building over at Postmark. So yes, they are currently, some people are renting spaces behind Postmark from the lot that's over there. And they can just renege that at any time, you know what I mean? It's just a month-to-month kind of thing. But yes, it did seem like a massive influx of people that don't have spots to be able to park. That obviously, like I said, just showed up to the meeting because they needed to do something about it. Now everyone can argue it's in their lease, it isn't, et cetera. But you know, I think this is a worthy solution just to put it in place. If they don't move by 6, they get towed. It's that simple. And then just to add upon with the overnight parking ban, I just know even when it's not a snow emergency, even just say today, on my street alone, just people parking there overnight, it's like almost impossible to get by anyway, because it's not, the street isn't fully wide, you know, as it would be normally. So I think that's just another element on it. But yeah, definitely this seems like a good viable solution. 35 spots, get out by 6, if not, you're towed. Like, we came up with something that we didn't have to, and you know, I commend the PTTF for figuring that out. I had mentioned Vine Street only because I can't mention anything with the commuter rail. So that was my suggestion. But I'm happy they came up with something.
Anne.
Just wondering, so 35 spots, I just wonder how much of the need do we think that's going to meet? So 120 tickets were written. Were there repeat offenders there?
I didn't really, I can look for you,
Yeah.
but I didn't check that right now.
Like, is the 35 going to be like a quarter of the cars on the street kind of thing? Or yeah,
I mean, I see it helping a lot this year, but as we build up more on Main
Right.
Street, I'm not sure if now we'll need another lot by next year at the winter time too.
well, it's certainly
Yeah,
going to make a dent at least. So let's
Yes.
try it. Yeah. But,
and I think Jean like to add.
Thank you. So yes, as a member of the Parking Traffic Transportation Task Force, I'm very pleased that we came up with a trial program, a pilot program. And I want to recognize my colleagues in DPW because this does cause them a little bit of pain, and obviously the police as well. But I think people were willing to give something a try, and that's really, I'm really proud of being part of a group that works that way. But I also wanted to add that I am also working behind the scenes with the MBTA to see if there are possible opportunities to allow overnight parking in their parking lot. So there's one parking lot that's owned by the MBTA. The last time I went by during the day, there was one car in the lot.
yeah.
And that's a paid parking lot. So this is a conversation I've had several times with my colleagues at the MBTA about collaboration. And my first 5 or 6 tries didn't get me very far. But early on, about 10 years ago, we were successful in getting a license agreement from the T for the Vine Street parking spaces, and that's about 40 parking spaces. And so for $1 a year, the town has the benefit of using those that parking lot. So I'm hopeful that we can continue to discuss these ideas and work collaboratively with the T. But I think taking a stab at this and giving it a try and providing some resources is the right way to go. So thank you.
Thank you. Carlo?
Thanks for that. The only question I have, and I'm sure it's been vetted, is the 6 a.m. a time change for they can park on the street? Or is it more DPW, you know, I'm cringing at this and they have to be out of there so I can plow it?
Well, once every overnight parking is only 1 to 6 a.m. So yes, they technically can move unless we say there's no on-street parking today for, you know, snow or whatever. But so we determine in that lot you have to leave by 6 a.m. and then we would have to make further rules that no one can go in that section for an hour or two, or you know, whatever we think they need to get in and plow it, because residents of the train station or resident stickers can start parking there at 6. So we just do need to differentiate that little section.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure. Thanks.
Yep, so they can go other places at 6. Yep.
Okay. Well, I think it's a great, I had the same question Anne had, how much of the demand 35 spaces was going to, but I guess we'll find out. Thank you. I think it's a great idea, and it's wonderful that you could come up with something quickly, and let's give it a shot, would be my vote. Chris?
Thanks, Aaron. To answer that question, I believe it was 26 is what that member mentioned over at the at Postmarks. Now, obviously, Postmark doesn't dictate the amount of spots. I believe it was 26, and I could be wrong, but you know, we have 35. It is what it is. If they're all full, they're all full. We offered them something. And if I could just ask Jean, are you talking about the Rite Aid parking lot for the train station, for the T-owned property over there? Or which were you talking about?
The MBTA-owned parking lot is the one that's across the railroad tracks. So if you're going down Woburn Street, you know, heading out to West Street, it's on the right-hand side.
Yep. Yeah, I'm talking
that-
about the one that's over at Rite Aid, McDonald's, that area over there.
Oh, yeah,
It's like
no.
12 or 15 spots or something like that.
Yeah, we've been trying on that one as well, but
That would be a good one to get.
yeah, we made the ask. The T doesn't think they own that. So that was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, whatever works.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So do we need to vote on this proposal, or yes? Okay, so
Have a
Mark, you already
motion.
have a motion then? Okay, great.
Indeed. Vote to
We-
recommend the changes for the overnight parking ban as proposed, and to hold a public hearing on February 15th, 2022 at 7:45 PM to finalize changes.
Second.
Thank you, Chris. Any further discussion? None appearing. Board members, as I see you, Mark,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
and Karen, yes. Great, thank you. Thank you, Chief and Jean.
Thanks.
For
Kate.
coming
care.
tonight.
Yeah.
Sorry it's so late. Appreciate
That's
it.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Just want to make one last plug if I could. I know it was said earlier, but Parks public meeting is tomorrow night.
Yes,
So
woof.
come
I already
on, come
ordered the
on.
popcorn. I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to discuss future agenda items. We just created one. And I think we want to add an in-depth update on the Zani property as to the status. And we would want to include everybody on that. I think that's the way I heard it. Carlo?
Karen, thanks. Yeah, this was discussed in my liaison report, but if we could set aside 5 minutes at our next meeting for a recreation committee to request temporary lights for Coolidge, because turf 1 is going to be down. Emily or somebody from the committee just wants to come and express the need and, you know, get our support. I don't think
And
I don't do it 5 minutes.
okay, and I am sorry if it was in your liaison report. Is this a money request or a permission request?
It's a permission request.
Okay.
I don't believe it's money. I believe it's permission.
Are the lights already there and they're asking our permission to turn them on within?
No,
certain
these would be temporary lights. There's no lights at the Coolidge.
Okay, so they'll bring them in. They're asking for our permission to put them on.
Yes.
But I suggest
Okay.
make room in case they need money. Make that part of the agenda item.
Well, and the other thing, this sounds easy, but often we have neighbors that get very upset when new lights go in the Birch Meadow area. So,
There's no, I mean, my kids played soccer back there, and I don't think there's any houses that directly abut that field. And the lights would be shining on the field. So yeah, it's a good point, but this is their ask.
okay, well, if we need to have a further discussion on it, we can do that. So if that
Yeah,
seems
I mean,
sensible to me. Okay.
they're losing, a lot of organizations are losing the lit high school till 9 o'clock. So that's the problem.
Okay. All right. Chris, sorry, and we'll get Mark next. Chris?
Yep, thanks, Karen. I think we have to have the discussion on Bob's parting salary gift, et cetera. What are the severance? That's the word, not parting gift, but yeah. We have to discuss if we want to do something or if it's 3 months, et cetera, the amount. So.
Okay, so for that, I think we'll want to invite Ivrea.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, Mark, sorry.
Thanks. So Jackie, in regards to candidates for recalc, do you happen to know how many candidates have submitted paperwork?
I think it's like 2.
So Carlo, would it make sense to take a look at, and do we have other applicants for open positions?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe Carlo, we could schedule a VASC meeting.
Yeah.
That'd be great. So not part of our next agenda, but
Okay, but you'll let us know.
a next agenda.
You need to bring appointees to us. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe if the timing works out, we might be able to bring them to the next meeting.
Okay. All right, you ready for minutes?
I had no comments on them.
I had a couple of little additions. Jackie, I know you have them. Could you put them on the screen or?
Did you want me to share those?
Sure. I
Okay.
can if you want, but
Carlo and Chris, did you have any edits? Okay.
I'm good, Karen, thanks.
No, no.
Can you see that okay?
Yes. Probably want to scroll down.
Yeah, I just gotta,
All right, thank you.
there we go. Here we go.
Okay, yeah, my first edit, it just came out that I asked DPW to do this and it was more of a proposal. Let's think about doing this. So that's all that edit was about. And then, yeah, in the discussions, definitely they were conceptual. That's it.
So are we ready for a motion?
I think so.
Vote to approve the meeting minutes for January 18th, 2022 as amended.
Second. Any discussion? None appearing. Are we ready for the vote? Okay, board members, as I see you, Mark,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
and Karen, yes. Great. Okay, I think we could ask for a final motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. Second. All those in favor, Mark,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
and Karen, yes. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks,
Great to see you,
folks.
Val. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.